Mia's heart pounded as she stood at the bus stop, her backpack slung over one shoulder, the night air cool against her skin. She glanced over her shoulder for the third time, half expecting to see her mother storming down the street, her expression as fierce as her words earlier that evening. "If you walk out that door, don't expect to come back," her mother had yelled, her voice cracking with frustration. Mia had frozen on the threshold, her hand gripping the doorknob. The weight of her mother's words pressed down on her, but the pull of the unknown, the promise of something bigger than her small-town life, was stronger. She had stepped out anyway, the door clicking shut behind her like a final verdict. Now, as the bus rumbled to a stop in front of her, Mia hesitated. Was this worth it? The tech event in the city had been a secret obsession for weeks. She'd stumbled upon a flyer online, Innovators of Tomorrow, a night of vision and inspiration with Elon Musk. It was the kind of opportunity she had only dreamed of, something her mother would never understand. "Last call, kid," the bus driver grumbled, snapping her out of her thoughts. Mia tightened her grip on her bag and climbed aboard. As she took a seat near the window, her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "Stay focused on school. Stop chasing pipe dreams." The bus pulled away, the streetlights flickering past like scattered stars. Mia tried to shake off the nagging guilt. This was her chance, her moment to prove to herself that she was more than the obedient daughter who followed every rule. The journey stretched on, the city lights growing brighter as the bus neared its destination. Mia's thoughts raced. What if I don't belong there? What if no one takes me seriously? When the bus finally came to a halt, Mia stepped out into a bustling street alive with energy. The venue loomed ahead, a sleek, glass building that seemed to pulse with potential. Mia took a deep breath and stepped forward, her resolve hardening. She had no idea that tonight would not only challenge everything she believed about herself, but also bring her face to face with the one person who could change her life forever. Elon Musk. The sound of the crowd and the hum of the city faded as Mia walked into the sleek venue. Inside, towering digital screens displayed futuristic images, self-driving cars, colonies on Mars, and robots assembling skyscrapers. The air was thick with anticipation, buzzing with conversations that felt far too intelligent for her to join. Mia hesitated near the entrance, clutching her backpack strap. This was a far cry from her small-town world, where people still debated whether solar panels were worth the investment. Here, people weren't just dreaming of the future, they were building it. Back home, Mia had always been the weird one. While other kids obsessed over prom or the latest social media trends, she spent hours in her garage, dismantling old appliances to see how they worked. The garage was her sanctuary, a cluttered, grease-streaked haven where she tinkered with makeshift drones and rudimentary coding projects. Her fascination with technology had started when she was 7, the day her father gave her an old, broken-down laptop he had planned to throw away. "Fix it if you can," he'd said, laughing as if it were impossible. But 3 days later, she had. Her mother, however, didn't share her father's enthusiasm. "School first, Mia," she'd insist every time she caught Mia tinkering. After her father passed away 2 years ago, those words became a mantra, a way to keep Mia tethered to a safe future. Mia understood where her mother was coming from. Her mother worked 2 jobs, barely keeping the lights on, and wanted her daughter to escape the cycle of struggle. But Mia wanted something different, something bigger. She wanted to create, to innovate, to leave her mark on the world. Now, standing in the middle of the tech expo, surrounded by people who shared her passion, she felt a spark of validation. This was where she belonged, or so she hoped. Her thoughts were interrupted by a man in a sleek suit, holding a tablet. "Name?" he asked, glancing at her expectantly. Mia's stomach tightened. She hadn't registered for the event. I'm just here to look around," she stammered, hoping he'd let her slide by. The man raised an eyebrow. "This event is invitation only. No ticket, no entry." Panic set in. All her planning, sneaking out and taking the bus, it couldn't end here. Before she could say anything else, a voice called out from behind her. "Hey, let her in. She's with me." Mia turned, startled. A tall, confident woman in her late 20s stood there, her hair tied back in a neat ponytail and a badge clipped to her jacket. The man hesitated, but eventually nodded. Fine, go ahead. Thanks, Mia whispered, following the woman through the security checkpoint. Don't mention it, the woman said with a grin. You looked like you were about to combust back there. Name's Clara, by the way. Mia, she replied, still shaken but grateful. Clara gave her a quick once-over. You're here for the Musk session, aren't you? Mia's eyes widened. How did you know? Kid, it's written all over your face, Clara said, smirking. Come on, you don't want to miss it. As Clara led her through the maze of displays and networking lounges, Mia felt her nerves begin to settle. Maybe she didn't belong here yet, but she was determined to prove that she could. What Mia didn't know was that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't have imagined. The auditorium was a marvel of modern design, its walls lined with glowing panels that displayed inspirational quotes from innovators throughout history. Rows of attendees murmured in excitement, their faces illuminated by the cool blue light of the stage. At the center stood a sleek podium, and above it, a banner read, Innovators of Tomorrow, an evening with Elon Musk. Mia sat at the very back, her heart pounding in her chest. Clara had managed to find her an empty seat, whispering, Stick close. You never know when luck might strike. The energy in the room shifted as the lights dimmed. A spotlight swept across the stage, and a tall figure walked out to a roar of applause. Elon Musk stood there, calm and self-assured, his presence commanding attention. Mia's fascination with Elon Musk had started years ago when she stumbled upon a documentary about SpaceX. Watching rockets land vertically and hearing Musk talk about colonizing Mars had lit a fire inside her. To Mia, Musk wasn't just a billionaire. He was a dreamer, someone who dared to push the boundaries of what was possible. She'd read everything about him. His successes, his failures, even the controversies. Now, seeing him in person, he seemed larger than life. Good evening, Musk began, his voice steady and clear. The future belongs to those who build it. His words hung in the air, and Mia leaned forward, captivated. Musk spoke about innovation, risk, and the necessity of failure. Every great idea sounds crazy at first, he said. If it doesn't, it's probably not ambitious enough. As he continued, Mia's mind raced. She had so many questions, so many thoughts. But how could she possibly ask them? What would someone like Elon Musk care about a 16-year-old girl from a nowhere town? The session shifted to a Q&A, and a line of eager attendees formed at the microphone. Mia watched as people asked detailed, technical questions, each one earning a thoughtful response from Musk. Clara nudged her. You're not going to just sit there, are you? Mia blinked. What? Go ask him something, Clara said, her tone playful but firm. I can't, Mia whispered, shaking her head. They're all professionals. What could I even say? Clara rolled her eyes. You're here, aren't you? That means you've got something to say. Don't waste this. Mia's palms were clammy as she stood and made her way to the line. She rehearsed a question in her head, her heart racing with every step closer to the microphone. When it was her turn, she stepped up, her voice trembling. Hi, Mr. Musk. My name's Mia, and I'm, really inspired by what you've done with SpaceX and Tesla. My question is, what advice would you give to someone who's just starting out and doesn't have resources or support but wants to make a difference? The room fell silent, and for a moment, Musk studied her, his expression thoughtful. That's a good question, he said finally, his tone sincere. The first step is to believe in your idea more than anyone else does. The second step is to do the work. Learn everything you can, even when no one is watching. And the third step? Don't be afraid to fail. Failure is the cost of ambition. Mia nodded, hanging on to every word. Thank you, she said softly, stepping away from the microphone. As she made her way back to her seat, her mind was ablaze with possibilities. Clara gave her a thumbs up, and for the first time that evening, Mia felt like she belonged. After the session, the crowd dispersed into networking lounges, but Mia lingered, watching as Elon Musk spoke with a group of executives. Part of her wanted to leave, to slip out before the night's magic wore off. But another part of her, the part that had dragged her to this event in the first place, whispered. Stay. Excuse me, a voice said, startling her. She turned to find Elon Musk standing a few feet away, looking directly at her. You asked a good question, he said simply. What's your story? Mia froze, her thoughts scrambling for coherence. She had no idea how to answer, but one thing was clear. Her life was about to take a turn she never expected. Mia's mind raced as she stared at Elon Musk, who stood before her, waiting for her answer. Her heart hammered in her chest. She had dreamed of this moment, meeting him, talking to him, but she never imagined it would actually happen. My story, she echoed nervously, stalling for time. Musk's expression remained patient but intrigued. Yes, you came to this event, asked a question that wasn't just technical but personal. That tells me you've got a reason for being here. So, what's your story? Mia swallowed hard. I'm just a girl from a small town. I like building things, machines, robots, anything I can tinker with, but no one takes me seriously. Not at school, not at home. I came here because I wanted to see I don't know, if there's a place for someone like me in this world. Musk tilted his head, considering her words. You like building things. What's the last thing you built? Mia hesitated, then blurted out, a drone? Well, it's not exactly finished. It flies, but the programming's a little glitchy. Musk nodded thoughtfully. What kind of drone? Just a basic quadcopter. I scavenged the parts from an old RC helicopter and a broken vacuum cleaner, she said, her nerves easing slightly as she spoke about her passion. A small smile tugged at the corner of Musk's mouth. A vacuum cleaner? That's creative. Mia felt a flicker of pride. Behind them, Clara appeared, her eyes wide with disbelief. Mia, are you talking to Elon Musk? She whispered, as though saying it aloud would break the spell. Musk glanced at Clara and nodded politely before turning back to Mia. You remind me of myself at your age, he said. Curious, determined, a little out of place in the world around you. Mia blinked, unsure how to respond. Here's the thing, Musk continued. It's not about where you come from. It's about where you're going and how hard you're willing to work to get there. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek business card. Send me a video of your drone when it's ready. If it impresses me, I'll arrange for you to visit one of my labs. Mia stared at the card in disbelief, her fingers trembling as she took it. You mean it? Why wouldn't I? Musk replied, his tone matter of fact. Talent comes from everywhere, but it's up to you to prove yourself. As Musk walked away to rejoin his group, Clara grabbed Mia's arm, her face alight with excitement. Are you serious right now? Do you know what just happened? You basically got a personal invite from Elon Musk. Mia clutched the card tightly, her mind spinning. This was more than she had ever hoped for. A chance to prove herself, to show that she belonged in this world of innovation and ambition. But as the thrill of the moment began to fade, doubt crept in. What if I'm not good enough? What if I mess it up? Clara seemed to sense her hesitation. Hey, don't overthink it, she said. This is huge. You've got a real shot to do something amazing. Take it. Mia nodded, forcing a smile. I will. As she left the venue that night, the weight of the opportunity and the pressure settled on her shoulders. She had a long road ahead, but for the first time, it felt like she was finally heading in the right direction. The bus ride home felt surreal. Mia sat in the back, the business card clutched tightly in her hand, as if it might vanish if she let go. Outside the window, the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and white, but her mind was far from the bustling streets. Send me a video of your drone. The words played on a loop in her head. This wasn't just a casual suggestion. It was an invitation to step into a world she'd always dreamed of. But it also carried the weight of expectation, and that terrified her. By the time Mia arrived home, it was nearly midnight. She tiptoed into the small apartment she shared with her mother, careful not to wake her. The living room was cluttered with laundry baskets and bills stacked on the coffee table. The faint hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. Her mother's voice startled her. Mia. Mia froze, guilt prickling at her skin. Her mother appeared in the doorway, wearing her work uniform and an exhausted expression. Where have you been? She asked, crossing her arms. I. I went to that tech expo I told you about, Mia admitted, bracing for the backlash. Her mother sighed, shaking her head. Mia, we've talked about this. You can't just run off to these things. Do you know how dangerous it is for a girl your age to be wandering around the city at night? I wasn't wandering, Mia protested. I needed to be there. I met people, important people. Her mother's eyes narrowed. Important people? Mia, these are pipe dreams. You need to focus on school, on real opportunities, not chasing after some fantasy. It's not a fantasy, Mia snapped, pulling out the business card and holding it up. I met Elon Musk. He gave me this and told me to send him a video of my work. Her mother stared at the card, her expression softening for a moment before hardening again. And what happens if nothing comes of it? What happens when you're disappointed, Mia? You need to think practically. Mia's frustration boiled over. Why can't you just believe in me for once? Dad would have understood. The mention of her father made her mother flinch, and guilt immediately followed Mia's outburst. Her mother turned away, her voice quiet. Your father always believed in dreams. But dreams didn't pay the bills, Mia. Mia wanted to argue, but the exhaustion in her mother's tone stopped her. Instead, she retreated to her room, slamming the door behind her. Her room was a chaotic mix of textbooks, tools, and half-finished projects. The drone sat on her desk, its propellers slightly misaligned and its wiring exposed. She stared at it, feeling the weight of her mother's words. What happens if nothing comes of it? But then she remembered Musk's advice. Believe in your idea more than anyone else does. Taking a deep breath, she sat down at her desk and powered up her laptop. If there was any chance of proving herself, she had to take it. She spent the next few hours fine-tuning the drone, her hands steady despite her exhaustion. By the time the sun rose, she had uploaded a test video to her computer. The drone hovered unsteadily in the footage, its movements jerky but functional. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. The next day, Mia sent the video to the email address printed on Musk's card. She included a brief message. Mr. Musk, thank you for the opportunity. Here's the video of my drone. It's still a work in progress, but I hope you can see the potential. Mia Roberts. Hitting send felt like jumping off a cliff. For the next several days, she checked her email obsessively, each notification making her heart skip a beat. But there was nothing from Musk or his team. Doubt began to creep in. What if her mother was right? What if she was chasing something impossible? Then, late one evening, her phone buzzed with a new email. The subject line read, "Impressive work." Mia's breath caught as she opened it. Mia, your drone shows promise. I'd like to see what else you can do. Are you available to visit our lab next week? Let me know. Elon Musk. Mia's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. She reread the email twice, her pulse racing. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. But with the opportunity came new questions. What would she tell her mother? What would she do if she failed? For now, though, there was only one certainty. She couldn't turn back. The email from Elon Musk felt like a secret burning in Mia's pocket, too precious and fragile to share. She read it over and over, the words imprinted in her mind. Are you available to visit our lab next week? The question was simple, but the implications weren't. She needed time off school, money for transportation, and, most of all, her mother's permission. Mia stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, her thoughts a whirlwind. Her mother's words still rang in her ears. Dreams didn't pay the bills. How could she convince someone so rooted in practicality to let her take a chance on something this big? At breakfast the next morning, Mia decided to test the waters. Her mother sat at the small kitchen table, sipping coffee and flipping through a stack of overdue bills. Mom, Mia began cautiously, I got an email last night. Her mother looked up, distracted. From who? Elon Musk. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, her mother didn't respond. Then she set down her coffee. Mia, if this is another one of your... It's real. Mia interrupted, pulling out her phone to show her the email. He wants me to visit one of his labs. Next week. Her mother took the phone and squinted at the screen, her expression shifting between skepticism and something softer, almost pride. But then her brows furrowed. How are you supposed to get there? How much is this going to cost? I'll figure it out, Mia said quickly. I can take the bus, and I'll borrow from my savings for the ticket. Her mother sighed. Mia, I know this seems exciting, but have you thought about what happens if it doesn't work out? If you go there and they don't take you seriously? I have thought about it, Mia said firmly, and I know it's a risk, but I can't just sit here and do nothing. I need to try. Her mother looked at her for a long moment, her eyes searching Mia's face for something. Finally, she said, if your dad were here, he'd tell me to let you go. So, I guess I will too. Mia's heart swelled. Really? Her mother nodded, though her expression remained guarded. But you need to promise me one thing. If this doesn't lead anywhere, you'll focus on school. No more chasing dreams until you have a solid plan. Mia didn't hesitate. I promise. The next few days were a blur of preparation. Mia spent hours tweaking her drone, tightening screws and recalibrating the software. Clara came over to help, bringing snacks and a steady stream of encouragement. You're going to blow them away, Clara said as Mia tested the drone in her backyard. I hope so, Mia replied, watching the drone hover smoothly for a few seconds before landing with a soft thud. When the day of her trip arrived, Mia felt a mix of excitement and nerves. She boarded the bus with a small backpack containing her drone, a notebook, and a change of clothes. Her mother had hugged her tightly before she left, whispering, "Be careful." The bus ride was long and uneventful, giving Mia plenty of time to overthink. What if Musk had already forgotten about her? What if she made a fool of herself? But as the lab came into view, a sleek, futuristic building surrounded by acres of green, those doubts faded. Inside, Mia was greeted by a receptionist who directed her to a conference room. The space was bright and modern, with glass walls and cutting-edge technology on display. A group of engineers worked nearby, their conversations a blur of technical jargon. Mia, a voice said behind her. She turned to see Elon Musk, his presence as commanding as ever. Welcome, he said, shaking her hand. Let's see what you've got. Mia set up her drone on a small table, her hands trembling slightly. She explained its design and functionality, her voice growing steadier as she spoke. Finally, she powered it on, and the drone lifted smoothly into the air. Musk watched closely, nodding. Impressive. You built this from scratch? Mostly, Mia said, feeling a surge of pride. He turned to one of the engineers. What do you think? The engineer smiled. It's good. With some refinement, it could be great. Musk looked back at Mia. How would you feel about an internship? Part-time for now, so you can finish school. Mia's jaw dropped. Are you serious? Very, Musk said. We need people who think like you. Creative, resourceful, hungry to learn. As Mia left the lab that evening, her mind was spinning. The internship was a dream come true, but it also meant stepping into a world she barely understood. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just chasing dreams, she was living one. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Mia's life was suddenly split into two worlds, the high-tech lab with Elon Musk's team and her small apartment, where she spent evenings working on school assignments. Balancing both felt like juggling fireballs. But for the first time, she didn't mind the heat. Her internship started out simple, mostly observation, helping with small tasks and offering suggestions based on what she had learned from tinkering with her drone. But every moment in the lab taught her something new. The engineers were brilliant, but they respected her input, even when it was just a fresh perspective on a problem. One afternoon, as she stood watching an engineer struggle with a malfunction in a prototype, she couldn't resist speaking up. What if you rerouted the power source to the auxiliary system? It might stabilize the feedback loop. The engineer paused, glancing at her, then at the prototype. That might actually work. Mia grinned. It's worth a try. He gave her an impressed look and then began making adjustments. Within minutes, the machine hummed to life. That's it, he said, slapping her a high five. Nice work. But as much as Mia thrived in the lab, she couldn't escape the pull of her old life. At home, her mother's disapproving looks were still there, lingering over the dinner table like a cloud. You're spending too much time with these people, Mia, her mother said one evening, stirring a pot of stew. What about school? Your grades are slipping. Mia flinched. I'm still on top of my assignments, Mom. And the internship, this is my future. Her mother sighed, the frustration evident in her eyes. And what if this doesn't work out? Then what? I don't know, Mom, Mia snapped, her patience running thin. But I have to try. I can't keep living the same way. I want more. Her mother's face softened, but the doubt remained. I don't want to see you get hurt. I've seen too many people with big dreams fall flat. Mia stood up, her mind racing. I'm not them. I'm not just going to sit back and wait for things to happen. I have to make them happen. Despite the tension at home, Mia's work at the lab was progressing faster than she expected. Musk had given her more challenging tasks, and she was proving herself capable. She even started designing her own projects, applying concepts she had learned and even inventing new solutions to problems she'd never considered before. One afternoon, Musk stopped by her workstation. Mia, we've got a problem we can't solve. The propulsion system in the new prototype isn't functioning as it should. The specs are fine, but it's overheating after the first 5 minutes of flight. Any ideas? Mia's heart raced as she considered the problem. She had seen similar issues with her own drone when she was first experimenting. What if the heat dissipation system isn't accounting for the full load during takeoff? She suggested. It might be overloading the cooling mechanism. If we tweak the algorithm for the initial thrust, it could make the system more efficient. Musk raised an eyebrow, impressed. Let's test it. Hours later, after running the modified prototype through a series of tests, the issue was solved. The prototype worked flawlessly. Musk turned to Mia with a satisfied grin. Well done. You just saved us weeks of work. She couldn't help but smile back. Glad I could help. The days passed in a blur of problem-solving, learning, and small triumphs. But the more Mia immersed herself in the world of innovation, the more she realized how much she had changed. She wasn't the girl who had come to the expo, unsure of her place in the world. She was someone who could create, contribute, and make a difference. Still, no matter how many successes she had, there was always the fear that it could all slip away. That this world, this new version of herself, was fragile. One mistake, and it could all vanish. Late one evening, as Mia sat at her desk reviewing a new design for a drone, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Clara. How's the lab? You're a genius, right? Mia couldn't help but laugh. She quickly typed a response. It's crazy. I'm actually learning a ton. But don't tell anyone. I still feel like I don't belong. Clara's reply was almost instant. You do belong, Mia. You're changing the world. Don't forget that. Mia smiled, but there was still a nagging doubt in her mind. Could she really do it? Could she really change the world? She pushed the thought aside and turned her attention back to her work. For now, she had one goal: to keep moving forward, one small victory at a time. Mia's days at the lab were starting to feel like a blur of successes. Each new project was more challenging, and every new piece of technology brought her closer to the edge of something monumental. But as the work piled up, so did the pressure. Mia's relationship with her mother continued to strain. Her mother had always been the pragmatic one, keeping everything in order while Mia followed her wild ambitions. But now, there was a new distance between them, a silence that neither of them could break. Her mother's comments about Mia spending too much time with people like Elon Musk had grown more frequent, more biting. One night, after returning from the lab, Mia found her mother waiting for her in the kitchen. I need to talk to you, her mother said, her voice quieter than usual. Mia took a deep breath. Okay, Mom, what's on your mind? I'm glad you're doing well at that lab, but you're losing yourself, Mia. Her mother's eyes were filled with worry. This dream of yours, it's consuming you. I don't want you to forget who you are. I'm not forgetting anything, Mia snapped, her frustration boiling over. This is my chance. You don't get it, do you? I can't just keep living like I'm invisible. This lab, this internship, it's my future. Her mother's voice trembled. I'm not saying it's not important, but you've changed, Mia. You're not the same girl I used to know. I can't even talk to you anymore without feeling like I'm speaking to a stranger. Mia's anger faltered. She felt the weight of her mother's words, but her pride kept her from showing it. Maybe I'm not the girl you want me to be, but I'm the person I need to be. The argument lingered in the air long after Mia retreated to her room. She felt a knot in her stomach, guilt and anger clashing together. But as much as she wanted to resolve things with her mother, she couldn't shake the feeling that the world she was stepping into was too big for both of them to understand. At the lab, things were moving fast. Elon Musk had been pushing her harder, giving her more responsibility with each passing day. He saw something in her, a spark that she had never recognized in herself until now. One day, he invited her to a meeting about a top-secret project. The details were sketchy, but Musk was excited, his eyes alight with that familiar intensity. "Mia," he said, his voice low and urgent, "we're working on something big here. We've designed a new propulsion system, and we need the best minds to make it work. I want you on this team." Mia felt a rush of excitement. "Really? What's the project?" "It's a game changer, but it's also risky. We need someone who isn't afraid to think outside the box." The words rang in her ears. Someone who isn't afraid. Her pulse quickened. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. She couldn't back down. "I'm in," Mia said without hesitation. The project began immediately. The first few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights, brainstorming sessions, and rapid prototyping. The team was brilliant, but the pressure was unlike anything Mia had experienced. It wasn't just about solving problems anymore. It was about creating something that could change the future. But as the pressure built, cracks began to show. One afternoon, Mia found herself in the lab, staring at a design that just wasn't working. No matter how many adjustments she made, the propulsion system kept failing. She could feel the weight of the project on her shoulders. Frustration clouded her thoughts. What if she couldn't do this? What if this was all too much for her? Just as she was about to give in to the wave of self-doubt, a voice broke through the silence. "Mia." It was Elon Musk. His expression was unreadable, but there was a glimmer of something in his eyes. "I need to ask you something," he said, his tone serious. "Are you ready to take the next step? This is a big leap. It's not just about science. It's about the future of humanity. It's going to take everything you've got." Mia's heart raced. "I'm ready," she said, her voice barely a whisper. But deep down, a voice in the back of her mind wondered if she was making a mistake. Was she pushing herself too hard? Was she losing sight of everything she had once cared about in the pursuit of something greater? That night, Mia sat alone in her room, her mind swirling with questions. She felt torn between her ambition and her roots, between the person she had become and the girl she used to be. The tension between them was suffocating. What would her mother think of her now? What would Clara say if she could see how far Mia had come? Would they still recognize the person she had become? The answers were elusive, slipping through her fingers like sand. But there was one thing Mia knew for sure. She couldn't stop now. The next morning, Mia made her decision. She would throw herself into the project, no matter what the cost. This was her shot. But as she walked into the lab, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a message from her mother. "I'm worried about you, Mia. Please come home. We need to talk." Mia hesitated for a moment, the weight of her mother's words pressing on her chest. She knew what she had to do, but she also knew that her decision would change everything. Mia's phone buzzed incessantly throughout the day, each new message from her mother weighing heavily on her heart. She had read the last one multiple times. "Please come home. We need to talk." Her mind swirled with conflicting emotions. Part of her wanted to push everything aside. This project, her work at the lab, the future she was building, to return to the safety of her family and the life she had known. But another part of her, the part that had gotten used to the adrenaline of innovation and the satisfaction of solving impossible problems, was terrified of taking a step backward. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "You're losing yourself, Mia." That evening, after another grueling round of tests and troubleshooting at the lab, Elon Musk called her into his office. He looked exhausted, but there was a fire in his eyes that Mia had come to recognize as determination. "Mia, I need your help on something," he began, his tone serious. "The next stage of this project is critical. If we can't get this propulsion system right, everything we've worked for is in jeopardy." Mia nodded, the weight of the words settling on her chest. "What do you need me to do?" "We need to run some high-stakes tests. It's going to push the boundaries of what we know, but I believe you're ready." She felt a rush of pride. Elon believed in her. He was pushing her to the limit, but this was her moment. This was what she had worked for. But as she followed him through the lab, the phone in her pocket buzzed again. It was another message from her mother. "I haven't seen you in so long. Please come home." The word stung. She had been so consumed by the project, so focused on proving herself, that she had lost touch with everything else. Mia felt her chest tighten. She could ignore the messages, push them aside, just for a little longer. After all, this was her future, right? But the guilt gnawed at her, persistent and unrelenting. The test began. Elon and the team watched as Mia worked, her mind laser-focused on the task at hand. Every move was deliberate, every calculation precise. The machine hummed with power, its components coming to life in front of her eyes. This was the culmination of everything she had learned and everything she had sacrificed. As she entered the final commands into the system, the propulsion unit began to shake. Mia's heart raced. She could feel the tension in the air. The test was on the brink of success or failure. Sweat dripped from her brow as she worked quickly, trying to stabilize the system. Then it happened. A loud bang echoed through the lab. Sparks flew from the machine as it powered down, the propulsion system failing in spectacular fashion. The room fell silent, the reality of the failure sinking in. Mia stood frozen for a moment, her mind racing. She had given everything to this project, and it had crashed in front of her. Elon looked at her, his face unreadable. "We'll fix this," he said, his voice calm but firm. "But we need to regroup. Now." Mia swallowed hard, fighting the tears that threatened to overwhelm her. She had failed. All the work, all the sacrifice. It had been for nothing. As the team worked to troubleshoot the issue, Mia stepped away, her thoughts spiraling. The failure felt like a punch to the gut, but it wasn't just the project she was worried about. It was everything else. Her mother's messages. The distance between them. Was this worth it? She had given up so much for this, but was it enough? What if she had gone too far, lost too much in the pursuit of something that could crumble in an instant? Her phone buzzed again. It was another message from her mother. "I miss you, Mia. Come home." This time, Mia didn't hesitate. She stood up, her mind made up. She couldn't keep running from her past, from the people who cared about her. She needed to go home, to reconnect with the things that truly mattered. Mia walked out of the lab, the weight of her decision heavy on her shoulders. The bright lights of the city felt distant, almost cold now. She had worked so hard to build a future in a world that felt alien, and yet here she was, returning to the place that had always grounded her. She couldn't ignore the guilt anymore. Her mother had been right all along. She had been so focused on the future, on proving herself, that she had neglected the people who had always been there for her. When Mia arrived home, her mother was sitting at the kitchen table, waiting for her. The look on her face was a mixture of relief and concern, and Mia felt a lump form in her throat. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered, sitting down across from her. "I didn't mean to shut you out." Her mother reached across the table, placing a hand on hers. "I just want you to be happy, Mia. I want you to follow your dreams, but I don't want you to lose yourself in the process." Mia nodded, feeling the weight of the conversation settle in her heart. She hadn't realized how far she had drifted until now. The project with Elon, the lab, the success, it all felt like a distant memory in that moment. What mattered now was the love and connection she had with her family. That night, as Mia lay in bed, she reflected on everything that had happened. The failure at the lab, the distance she had created between herself and her mother, but also the realization that her journey wasn't just about success or failure. It was about balance. It was about finding the strength to chase her dreams while never forgetting where she came from. She wasn't done yet. She would go back to the lab, but with a new sense of purpose. The journey was far from over. Mia woke up the next morning with a new resolve. The weight of her decision the night before had not lifted, but it had transformed into something else, something clearer, more manageable. She knew what she had to do now: balance. It wasn't just about Elon Musk and his ambitious projects. It wasn't just about her mother's warnings. It was about finding a path that allowed her to honor both her ambition and her roots. As she sat down for breakfast, her mother looked up from her coffee, her eyes soft but still concerned. "I'm glad you're here," her mother said quietly. "I was worried." Mia smiled. Her heart warmed despite the strain of the past few weeks. "I'm sorry I shut you out, Mom. I was just lost in everything. I thought I had to choose one thing over the other." Her mother reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Mia, you don't have to choose. You can do both. But don't forget that your family is here, no matter what happens. We're your foundation." Mia nodded, feeling a rush of gratitude. "I understand now. I think I needed to come back to realize that." She took a deep breath. "But I can't just walk away from the lab either. I have to finish what I started. I owe it to myself." Her mother's eyes softened, her lips curling into a small, understanding smile. "Then go. But just promise me something. Don't lose sight of what really matters. You'll always have us." After breakfast, Mia sat down to text Elon. It wasn't an easy message to write, but it was necessary. "Elon," she typed, "I've been thinking a lot about everything. I know the project is important, but I need to take a step back. I need to make sure I'm still grounded in what matters." She hit send, then stared at the phone, waiting for his reply. Her heart raced, unsure of how he would respond. A few minutes later, her phone buzzed. "I get it, Mia. No one can work at 100% all the time. Take your time, but know this project is bigger than any one of us. When you're ready, we'll be here." His words hit Mia like a wave of relief. Elon Musk, the visionary who had pushed her so hard, was giving her the space she needed. Maybe she wasn't ready to leave the lab completely, but this moment of understanding felt like a victory in itself. Mia spent the next few days reflecting on her path. She went for long walks in the neighborhood, reconnected with Clara, and spent time with her mother. The tension that had once weighed her down seemed to dissipate, replaced by a quiet sense of balance. One afternoon, as she sat on the porch with Clara, the older woman looked at her thoughtfully. "You seem different," Clara said, her gaze sharp as always. "Like you're at peace with something." Mia smiled, her eyes distant for a moment. "I guess I'm just realizing that I don't have to prove anything to anyone, including myself. I've spent so much time chasing this future, trying to get ahead, that I lost sight of what matters. I don't want to make that mistake again." Clara nodded slowly, her lips twitching upward in a knowing smile. "It's easy to get caught up in the rush, but life's not just about what you achieve. It's about the people you have beside you when the dust settles." Mia's chest tightened with emotion. "I've been so focused on proving I belong in that world, the one Elon's part of, that I forgot how important it is to stay grounded." Clara's eyes softened with sympathy. "You've always had big dreams, Mia. But remember, your roots are what make you strong. Don't ever forget where you come from." The days that followed were a mix of work and reflection. Mia returned to the lab, but with a renewed focus. She wasn't throwing herself into the project as an escape anymore. She was engaging with it because it was a part of who she had become. She would work hard, but she would also make time for herself, for her family, for the relationships that had always supported her. As she re-entered the lab, Elon Musk greeted her with his usual intensity. "Mia," he said, "I've got an update. I think we can make the breakthrough we've been hoping for. Are you ready to dive back in?" Mia smiled, the anxiety she had felt earlier replaced by a sense of purpose. "Let's do it." But this time, it was different. Mia wasn't just working to prove herself to Elon or anyone else. She was working to prove something to herself, to show that she could thrive in both worlds without losing who she was in the process. Later that evening, as Mia sat in her apartment reviewing the new project plans, she received another message from her mother. "Don't forget to rest, Mia. We love you." Mia smiled to herself, her heart full. She wasn't alone in this journey, and she had a family who cared about her, no matter how far she reached for the stars. The following weeks were a whirlwind of progress at the lab. Elon's propulsion system had finally begun to show signs of success, and Mia felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. But even as her career reached new heights, she stayed grounded, making sure to maintain the balance she had found with her family and her personal life. One evening, as the lab team gathered to discuss the next phase of the project, Mia glanced at Elon. His eyes met hers, and for the first time, She didn't feel the pressure to prove herself to him. She was confident in who she was, in the work she had done, and in the future she was building, not just for herself, but for the people she loved. She had learned that ambition, when balanced with love and understanding, could fuel the greatest achievements. And she was ready to face whatever came next, knowing that she wasn't doing it alone. The tension in the lab was palpable. The team had made significant strides with the propulsion system, but they were still facing the final hurdle, a small yet crucial malfunction in the reactor core. Every test, every tweak, only seemed to delay the inevitable. They were running out of time. Mia spent late nights poring over the calculations, trying to pinpoint the flaw. Despite her best efforts, the machine wouldn't cooperate. The weight of the project was no longer just on her shoulders. It had become a shared burden. The team was beginning to feel the pressure too. Elon Musk, typically calm in the face of adversity, had begun to show signs of strain. His sharp, calculating demeanor seemed slightly off, and for the first time, Mia could sense his frustration. "We can't afford to fail now," Elon muttered one evening, pacing back and forth in the control room. "This is the moment we've been waiting for. If we don't crack this, everything will fall apart." Mia nodded, but she could see the crack in his resolve. He wasn't just concerned about the project. He was worried about the consequences of failure, consequences that could ripple beyond the lab and affect everything he had built. But Mia wasn't like him. She had learned to balance the fear of failure with the knowledge that success was never guaranteed. She understood that even in the face of defeat, there was always something to learn, something to build upon. "Let's take a step back," she said, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "We've been working nonstop for days. Maybe we're too close to see the bigger picture. Let's regroup, clear our minds, and then come back with fresh eyes." Elon didn't respond immediately, his eyes flicking between the team and the control panels. But eventually he sighed. "You're right," he muttered, rubbing his forehead. "We've pushed ourselves to the limit. Maybe we need a break." The next morning, Mia went for a walk around the city to clear her mind. The streets, once full of energy and excitement, felt quieter than usual. She passed by familiar landmarks. The cafe where she'd spent countless hours studying, the park where she used to go for runs, the old bookstore where she had spent afternoons lost in novels. It was strange to think how much had changed. She wasn't the same person who had first arrived in the city, eager to prove herself. Back then, she thought she had to sacrifice everything: family, friends, even her own sense of identity, to succeed. Now, she knew better. Mia stopped by the park, sitting on a bench to gather her thoughts. She pulled out her phone, checking messages. There was another text from her mother. "I hope you're taking care of yourself, Mia. Don't forget to rest." She smiled softly, her mother's concern always grounding her. But there was something deeper in the message now. It wasn't just a reminder. It was a reminder of what mattered most: her well-being, her peace of mind. She sat there for a while, reflecting on everything she had been through. The relentless work, the sacrifices, the strained relationships, and the progress she had made. She had come so far, and yet she realized there was so much more she still needed to learn. By the time Mia returned to the lab, the team had taken a short break. Elon had retreated to his office, and the others were gathered around the coffee table, reviewing their notes and discussing possible solutions. Mia joined them, her mind still swirling with her recent reflections. The tension in the room had lifted somewhat, but the urgency remained. She knew it was time to take the next step, not just in the project, but in her own personal journey. "We need to rethink the reactor's design," Mia said, her voice cutting through the chatter. "What if the issue isn't with the core itself, but with the way we're stabilizing it?" The room fell silent as everyone turned their attention to her. Elon, who had been watching from his office doorway, stepped in, his interest piqued. "Explain," he said, a spark of hope returning to his eyes. Mia took a deep breath, organizing her thoughts. "What if we adjust the stabilization algorithm? If we refine it to account for the reactor's power fluctuations, we could prevent the core from overloading." It was a bold suggestion, one that could either save them or push them back to square one. But Mia was confident. This was the breakthrough they needed. Elon considered her words for a moment, then nodded. "All right, let's do it." The team worked together, pooling their expertise to modify the reactor's design. Mia felt the familiar thrill of problem-solving, but there was something different about this moment. She wasn't just working to solve a technical issue. She was solving a personal one as well. For the first time in weeks, Mia felt at peace. She had found her balance between work and life, ambition and connection. As they prepared for the next round of tests, Elon pulled Mia aside. "You've made a huge contribution here," he said, his voice more sincere than she had ever heard it. "If this works, it'll be because of you. Thank you for your persistence." Mia smiled, the compliment grounding her in the present moment. "It's a team effort, Elon, but I'm glad I could help." The tests that followed were a whirlwind of data and calculations, but as the hours passed, they finally saw results. The reactor was stable. The propulsion system was functioning as it should. The project was back on track. But as the team celebrated, Mia felt something inside her shift. She wasn't just celebrating a professional achievement. She was celebrating the personal growth that had brought her here. The journey wasn't just about the science. It was about who she had become along the way. As the team cheered and congratulated each other, Mia's phone buzzed again. She glanced at it, her heart skipping a beat when she saw her mother's name. "I knew you could do it. I'm so proud of you, Mia." Mia smiled, a feeling of warmth flooding through her. It wasn't just the project that had succeeded. It was the harmony she had found between the person she had been and the person she was becoming. It was a new day, and the lab was buzzing with excitement. The propulsion system was finally working. The project was moving forward, and the possibilities felt limitless. But as the team celebrated their success, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The victory was sweet, but there was a nagging sense of uncertainty, a feeling that something, somewhere, would come crashing down. Mia walked through the lab, her footsteps light but her mind heavy. She had worked for this moment, sacrificed so much to get here. And yet, the celebration felt incomplete. Elon, as usual, was the first to voice his thoughts. "This is just the beginning," he said, standing in front of the project's blueprints, eyes gleaming with excitement. "This technology is going to change everything. We're going to redefine the future of space exploration." The others around him nodded, caught up in the fervor of the moment. But Mia couldn't join in. Something about Elon's vision felt too big, too all-encompassing. She had seen how this kind of ambition could blind people to the consequences, to the cost of pushing forward without considering the repercussions. As the day wore on, Mia found herself retreating from the group. She sat down at her desk, staring at the blinking screen in front of her. The system was running smoothly now, but what would happen when they pushed it even further? What if the technology they had developed, meant to revolutionize space travel, had unintended consequences on Earth itself? Her phone buzzed again. It was another message from her mother. "I know you're busy, but I wanted to remind you. Always remember who you are. Don't let the world change you." Mia smiled softly, her heart warming at the reminder. Her mother always had a way of bringing her back to Earth, grounding her when the world around her seemed to be spiraling out of control. She typed a quick reply. "I'm trying, Mom, but it feels like the stakes are getting higher every day." Her mother's response was immediate. "You've always been strong, Mia, but don't let the weight of the world crush you. Take care of yourself." Mia set her phone down, running a hand through her hair. The stakes had always been high, but this felt different. Elon's project had the potential to change the world, yes, but there was a cost to that kind of ambition. Mia had learned that the hard way. She had been so driven to prove herself, so eager to succeed, that she had nearly lost herself in the process. Could she really be a part of something this monumental? And at what cost? As the week progressed, Mia couldn't shake the doubts that kept resurfacing. She found herself looking at the project through a different lens, one that she hadn't considered before. Elon's vision, while inspiring, also felt dangerous. The technology they were developing wasn't just a breakthrough in space travel. It was a weapon, a tool that could be used to control, to manipulate, to dominate. Mia's phone buzzed again. This time, it was from Clara. "I've been thinking about you, Mia. I know you're on the verge of something big, but don't forget that it's okay to step back and evaluate things. Sometimes, the world moves too fast, and we need to slow down to see where we're really headed." Clara's words echoed in Mia's mind as she walked around the lab, watching her colleagues celebrate their success. She could see the excitement in their faces, but there was something unsettling about it. They weren't seeing the bigger picture. They weren't thinking about the potential consequences of their work. Mia had always been driven by the desire to make a difference, to leave a legacy. But now, she was starting to question whether the legacy they were creating was the one she wanted to be a part of. The breakthrough that had once seemed so exhilarating now felt like a ticking time bomb. Mia couldn't shake the thought that their success might be a double-edged sword. What if the technology they had developed fell into the wrong hands? What if it wasn't just space exploration that changed, but everything else? Society, politics, even the very fabric of humanity. Mia decided it was time to confront Elon. She couldn't just ignore her concerns anymore. She found him in his office, his eyes scanning the data on his tablet. When he looked up and saw her standing in the doorway, he raised an eyebrow. "Mia," he said, his tone soft but intrigued. "What's on your mind?" "I need to talk to you about the project," Mia said, her voice steady but firm. Elon leaned back in his chair, setting the tablet aside. "What's bothering you?" Mia took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "I'm starting to wonder if we're moving too fast. We've been so focused on the potential benefits of this technology, but what about the risks? What if we're opening a door that we can't close?" Elon's expression shifted slightly, his eyebrows furrowing in thought. "You're worried about the unintended consequences, aren't you?" Mia nodded. "I am. We've created something that has the potential to change everything. But that doesn't mean it's all good. What happens when it's used for something we didn't intend? What happens when we can't control it anymore?" There was a long silence as Elon processed her words. Finally, he spoke. "I've thought about it, Mia," he said quietly. "I know the risks, but we can't stop now. The future is at stake." Mia stared at him, her heart heavy. She had known that Elon was driven by his vision of a better future, but now she wondered if that vision was blinding him to the dangers they were walking toward. "I understand your passion," she said, her voice tight with emotion. "But I don't think we're the ones who should be deciding what that future looks like. It's too big. It's too dangerous." Elon didn't respond right away. He just looked at her, as if seeing her for the first time. After a long moment, he sighed. "Maybe you're right. But what do we do now?" Mia didn't have an answer. All she knew was that the world they were creating was too uncertain, too full of unknowns. The risks outweighed the rewards, and Mia was no longer sure that the cost of progress was worth it. As Mia left Elon's office, she felt a sense of unease settle deep within her. She had confronted her mentor, but the conversation had left her with more questions than answers. What had they really created? And was the world ready for it? The uncertainty of the future hung in the air like a storm cloud, waiting to burst. And Mia knew that the decisions they made in the coming days would change everything, not just for her, but for everyone. The days following her conversation with Elon were filled with restless uncertainty. Mia couldn't shake the feeling that they were playing with fire, but she also knew that stepping back wasn't an option. The project had momentum now, and they were too deep in to back out. Elon, for all his faults, wasn't one to let go of a vision once it was in his grasp. The team continued to work relentlessly, adjusting the systems, running simulations, and preparing for the next phase of testing. The propulsion system was nearing perfection, and the reactor core, once a source of constant anxiety, seemed to have found its balance. For a moment, Mia allowed herself to believe that they were on the brink of something revolutionary, but the doubt still lingered in the back of her mind. That night, as Mia sat at her desk reviewing the latest data, her phone buzzed again. Another text from her mother. "Don't forget, Mia, the world will always change, but you need to remember who you are in the process." Mia paused, staring at the message for a long time. Her mother had always been a steady voice in her life, reminding her to stay grounded. But Mia wondered if that was even possible anymore. She had given so much of herself to this project, to this dream, that she didn't know where her own identity ended and the project began. As the weeks passed, the scope of the project grew exponentially. What had once been a breakthrough in space travel began to look like something much larger, more dangerous. Elon's ambition had only grown, and with it, the expectations. He began speaking less about the science and more about the future, about how their work would change the world. "We're not just talking about space anymore, Mia," he told her one afternoon, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "This is about rethinking humanity. The power we're unlocking isn't just for exploration. It's for the betterment of mankind. Think about it. We could change energy, communication, transportation, everything." Mia listened to him, her mind swirling. On the one hand, Elon's vision was incredibly appealing. The idea of transforming the world for the better was undeniably compelling. But on the other hand, she couldn't ignore the nagging voice in her head, the one warning her of the dangers of unchecked power. One night, after another exhausting round of tests, Mia found herself wandering the empty halls of the lab. She needed a break, needed to clear her head. She stepped outside into the cool night air, the city lights twinkling in the distance. The streets were quiet, almost eerily so, as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. As Mia walked aimlessly, she thought about all the things that had brought her here. The late nights spent studying, the sacrifices she had made, the friends she had left behind. Was it all worth it? Would any of it matter if the technology they were developing ended up being used in ways they hadn't intended? Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Another message from Clara. "I've been thinking about you a lot, Mia. Just wanted to remind you that no matter what happens, your worth isn't defined by the project, by Elon, or anyone else. You are enough just as you are." Mia stopped in her tracks, her heart heavy. Clara's words were a balm to her soul, but they only deepened her internal conflict. She had always been defined by her work, by her drive to prove herself. But was that really who she was? The next day, Mia arrived at the lab early, determined to push through the uncertainty. She couldn't afford to second-guess herself now, not when they were so close to achieving something extraordinary. The team was already gathered around the reactor, preparing for the next round of tests. Elon was standing at the front, his voice filled with enthusiasm as he outlined the final steps of the experiment. "Today is the day," he said, his eyes scanning the room. "Today, we see the future. This is where it all changes." Mia nodded, trying to focus. The reactor hummed softly in the background, a constant reminder of the power they were about to unleash. She felt a twinge of anxiety, but she pushed it aside. It was too late for hesitation. As the test began, the room was filled with the whirring of machinery and the soft clicking of keyboards. The team monitored the reactor's core, watching the numbers climb on the screen. For a moment, everything seemed perfect. The systems were stable, the energy levels were within acceptable limits. But then, as the reactor reached its peak output, something unexpected happened. The lights flickered, and the monitors began to glitch. The temperature inside the reactor spiked. "Shut it down. Now!" Mia shouted, her heart racing. But it was too late. The room erupted into chaos as the reactor overloaded, a burst of energy surging through the lab. The alarms blared, and everyone scrambled to shut down the systems. But it was already out of control. Mia's mind raced as she watched the reactor flicker and flash. She had seen the warning signs earlier, but she had pushed them aside. They hadn't listened. Elon hadn't listened. With a final, deafening burst, the energy spiked and then collapsed in on itself, sending a shockwave through the lab. The room was plunged into darkness. The hum of the reactor stopped, and there was a moment of utter silence. Mia's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't hear anyone. She couldn't see anything. Then, slowly, the emergency lights flickered on, casting an eerie red glow over the room. Mia's heart pounded in her chest as she rushed to the control panel, trying to assess the damage. The reactor was offline, but the systems were a mess. Screens were cracked, cables were smoking, and the energy readings were erratic. "Elon," Mia called, her voice shaky. From across the room, she saw him, standing motionless, staring at the wreckage. His face was pale, his expression unreadable. "This was never supposed to happen," he murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. Mia stepped forward, her voice cold with disbelief. "You didn't think it through, Elon. We were pushing it too far. You were too focused on the future to see the present." In the following days, the full scope of the damage became clear. The The reactor malfunction had destroyed key components of the lab, and the technology they had worked so hard to perfect was now in ruins. Elon was too stunned to speak, the weight of their failure pressing down on him. For Mia, it wasn't just about the lab. It was about the future, her future, the future of the project, and the future of humanity. She had known that this day would come, but she hadn't been prepared for the fallout. The ripple effect had already begun. Mia sat in her office, the silence around her overwhelming. The only sound was the soft hum of the emergency generator, its dim light casting long shadows across the room. She couldn't help but replay the events of the past few days in her mind, over and over again. The reactor failure had been a nightmare, but it was more than just that. It was a warning, a sign that they had pushed too far, too fast, without truly considering the consequences. The team had been sent home for the day, each person retreating to their own corner of the world to process what had just happened. Elon, however, hadn't left the lab. He was still there, staring at the wreckage, as if by sheer willpower he could make it all right again. Mia had known him long enough to recognize when he was at his breaking point. The man who had once been brimming with confidence and vision now seemed lost, his dreams reduced to shattered pieces on the floor. The next morning, Mia made her way to the lab, her steps heavy with the weight of what was about to unfold. She couldn't ignore the gnawing sense of dread in her stomach. What happened next would shape everything, both for her and for the world. As she entered the lab, she found Elon sitting at the same desk he had been the night before. His face was buried in his hands, his body slumped with exhaustion. It was rare for Elon to show vulnerability, but this was different. The stakes had shifted, and so had he. Mia cleared her throat, startling him. He looked up at her, his eyes red and tired. "I'm sorry, Mia," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I pushed too hard. I thought I could control it, but I couldn't. I didn't see the danger." Mia took a deep breath, steadying herself. This was the moment where everything would change. "We all pushed too hard," she said, her tone even but firm. "But now we have to fix it. Together." For the first time in weeks, Elon looked at her with something other than stubborn determination. There was a flicker of realization in his eyes, as though he understood the gravity of what had just happened. He wasn't alone in this. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step towards salvaging what they had left. The days that followed were filled with an exhausting mix of troubleshooting, brainstorming, and rethinking their approach. Mia and Elon worked side by side, the once palpable tension between them replaced by a shared sense of purpose. They didn't have time to dwell on the past. They had to rebuild and fast. As they worked, the rest of the team slowly trickled back into the lab, their faces a mixture of disbelief and cautious optimism. No one spoke of quitting. There was too much at stake. Too many lives had been affected by their work, both for better and worse, and now they had to find a way to make it right. But even as they tried to fix what had been broken, the shadows of doubt continued to linger. Mia found herself torn between her loyalty to the project and the nagging voice inside her head that warned her this could spiral further out of control. She had already sacrificed so much. Her family, her relationships, her sense of self, and she didn't know how much more she could give. She reached out to Clara again, hoping for some semblance of clarity. "I don't know who I am anymore, Clara. I've given everything to this, and I'm not sure it's worth it. I don't know if I can keep going like this. Please, help me see the way forward." Clara's response was immediate, as always, but this time, Mia could sense the weight of her words. "Mia, the world will always need visionaries. But those who can change the world must also remember who they are in the process. If you lose yourself, what's left? Find balance, and remember that your worth is not just in what you can achieve. It's in who you are, right now, without the project, without Elon, without the expectations." Mia read the message over and over again, the simplicity of Clara's words cutting through the fog of her confusion. She realized Clara was right. She had been so consumed by the mission that she had forgotten about herself. But how could she find that balance again when everything around her was spinning out of control? The next test was coming up. The systems had been recalibrated, and the team was ready to try again. Elon's vision was still alive. But now, more than ever, Mia knew they needed to approach it with caution. She couldn't afford to let the rush of ambition cloud their judgment. As they gathered around the control panel, Mia glanced at Elon. His face was set with determination, but there was a subtle shift in his demeanor. He wasn't as sure of himself as he had been before, and Mia could see that the weight of their past mistakes had humbled him. They were no longer just chasing the dream. They were fighting to make it a reality without destroying everything in the process. The test began, and for a moment, Mia felt the familiar surge of adrenaline. The reactor powered up, the hum of the machines filling the room. But this time, there was no panic. No overwhelming sense of fear. The systems were stable. The readings were normal. Everything was going according to plan. As the reactor reached its peak, the team watched in silence, each person holding their breath. Would it work this time? Would they finally get it right? When the test ended, the room was filled with a collective exhale. The systems had held steady. There had been no failures, no explosions. Just the quiet hum of a functioning reactor. Mia couldn't help but smile. It wasn't perfect yet, but it was a step in the right direction. A small victory in a war that had already taken its toll. Later that night, Mia stood outside the lab, staring up at the stars. The night was peaceful, a sharp contrast to the chaos of the past few days. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of peace settle in her chest. The road ahead was still uncertain, but perhaps, just perhaps, they could make it work. She pulled out her phone and sent Clara a simple message. "We did it. For now." She paused, then added, "Thank you for reminding me who I am." The reply came instantly, "Always." Mia wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was certain. She was no longer just a part of a project. She was Mia, a woman who had chosen to fight for a better future, but who would never forget to fight for herself, too. The days following their small victory felt like a delicate balance. Mia had learned not to trust the calm that followed a major breakthrough. It always preceded another challenge, another test of their resolve. The team had been rejuvenated by the success of the reactor test, but there was still work to be done. The future of their project, their vision, was still far from certain. For the first time in months, Mia found herself feeling a sense of pride, even if it was fleeting. There had been a breakthrough, yes, but she knew that one success didn't guarantee future results. They had learned the hard way how quickly everything could spiral out of control. They would have to stay vigilant, recalibrating, rethinking, always adjusting. She couldn't afford to relax, couldn't afford to let their guard down again. One evening, after another round of tests and adjustments, Mia was sitting in her office, reviewing the team's reports. The lab had gone silent. Everyone dispersed to their respective workspaces or gone home for the night. She thought about calling her mother, her heart aching for the comfort of familiar voices, for the warmth of the guidance she had always counted on. But something held her back. It was as if the tension between her personal life and the life she had created in the lab had become too great to bridge. She was no longer sure of the person who would pick up the phone on the other end of that call. Instead, she found herself staring at the lab's reactor core. Its steady pulse was comforting, yet ominous. For all the power it promised, Mia knew it could just as easily be their undoing. Elon was absent the next morning, a rare occurrence. He had always been present, always overseeing every detail with his characteristic fervor. But today, his absence was palpable. Mia found herself trying to fill the void left by his sudden retreat, but his shadow loomed large over the lab, even in his physical absence. Mia couldn't help but smile. It wasn't perfect yet, but it was a step in the right direction. A small victory in a war that had already taken its toll. Later that night, Mia stood outside the lab, staring up at the stars. The night was peaceful, a sharp contrast to the chaos of the past few days. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of peace settle in her chest. The road ahead was still uncertain, but perhaps, just perhaps, they could make it work. She pulled out her phone and sent Clara a simple message. "We did it. For now." She paused, then added, "Thank you for reminding me who I am." The reply came instantly, "Always." Mia wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was certain. She was no longer just a part of a project. She was Mia, a woman who had chosen to fight for a better future, but who would never forget to fight for herself, too. The days following their small victory felt like a delicate balance. Mia had learned not to trust the calm that followed a major breakthrough. It always preceded another challenge, another test of their resolve. The team had been rejuvenated by the success of the reactor test, but there was still work to be done. The future of their project, their vision, was still far from certain. For the first time in months, Mia found herself feeling a sense of pride, even if it was fleeting. There had been a breakthrough, yes, but she knew that one success didn't guarantee future results. They had learned the hard way how quickly everything could spiral out of control. They would have to stay vigilant, recalibrating, rethinking, always adjusting. She couldn't afford to relax, couldn't afford to let their guard down again. One evening, after another round of tests and adjustments, Mia was sitting in her office, reviewing the team's reports. The lab had gone silent. Everyone dispersed to their respective workspaces or gone home for the night. She thought about calling her mother, her heart aching for the comfort of familiar voices, for the warmth of the guidance she had always counted on. But something held her back. It was as if the tension between her personal life and the life she had created in the lab had become too great to bridge. She was no longer sure of the person who would pick up the phone on the other end of that call. Instead, she found herself staring at the lab's reactor core. Its steady pulse was comforting, yet ominous. For all the power it promised, Mia knew it could just as easily be their undoing. Elon was absent the next morning, a rare occurrence. He had always been present, always overseeing every detail with his characteristic fervor. But today, his absence was palpable. Mia found herself trying to fill the void left by his sudden retreat, but his shadow loomed large over the lab, even in his physical absence. The news of the reactor's success had begun to spread, and with it, new pressure. Investors, world leaders, and influential figures were suddenly more interested than ever in the project. The pressure to succeed was mounting, but now it wasn't just about ambition. It was about survival. The weight of expectations was suffocating. Mia sat in the control room, running a simulation to test the reactor's performance under extreme stress. The data was promising, but there was a part of her that couldn't stop questioning the choices they had made. They were moving so fast, pushing so hard. Was it enough? Was it responsible? At lunchtime, Mia found herself walking through the lab, passing colleagues who were already discussing new innovations for the project. She overheard a conversation between two engineers, their voices filled with excitement over the latest discovery in the propulsion system. One of them, a younger woman named Sarah, was saying, "This could be it. If we crack this, we'll have the most efficient propulsion system ever. No one will even come close. It'll change everything." The enthusiasm in Sarah's voice was infectious, but Mia couldn't help but feel a tightness in her chest. She remembered what Clara had said. The need for balance, the need to remember who they were in the process. Could they really keep pushing forward like this, without considering the risks? But there was no time to dwell on it. The team was moving fast, and Mia knew she couldn't afford to lose momentum. Elon had made it clear that they couldn't stop now. The world was watching, and if they didn't push forward, someone else would. Elon finally returned to the lab late in the afternoon, his face a mix of exhaustion and determination. He barely spoke to anyone as he walked past them, heading straight to the reactor room. Mia followed, her curiosity piqued by his sudden silence. When she entered the room, she found him standing in front of the reactor, his hands clasped behind his back. He didn't turn to acknowledge her presence, but instead stared at the machine as though it held the answers to questions he could no longer ask aloud. Mia took a few steps closer, her voice tentative. "Elon." He turned slowly, his face softening when he saw her. "I was thinking," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "We've made progress, but it's not enough. I know what the next step is. We need to take it further, much further." Mia blinked, trying to follow his train of thought. "What do you mean? We just had a successful test. We're making progress. Maybe it's time we take a step back and reassess." "No," he interrupted, his voice firm but not unkind. "I've been thinking about this for a long time. What we've done so far is just scratching the surface. If we stop now, we risk losing everything. I'm not willing to do that." Mia's stomach twisted with unease. "You're talking about more tests, more experiments. But what about the damage we've already caused, Elon? What about the consequences? He exhaled sharply, the tension in his shoulders apparent. I'm not blind to the risks, Mia, but think about it. This is the future. This could change everything. Energy, transportation, medicine, you name it. We can't stop now. The words hung in the air, heavy and charged with an undeniable conviction. Mia knew that look in his eyes. He was determined, unyielding, and he was asking her to join him. But this time, she wasn't sure she could. Later that night, Mia sat alone in her office, the weight of Elon's words pressing down on her. She knew that he was right in many ways. The project could change the world. But was it worth it? What if their progress was pushing them towards something even worse? Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden knock on the door. "Come in," she called. The door creaked open, and to Mia's surprise, it was Clara standing in the doorway, a concerned look on her face. "Mia, I've been trying to reach you," Clara said softly. "I know something's been eating at you. I can see it. What's going on?" Mia hesitated, unsure of how to explain the chaos in her mind. "I don't know anymore. It's all moving so fast. I don't know if I can keep up. I'm scared of what we're becoming." Clara stepped into the room and closed the door behind her. "Mia, you're strong. You've always known who you are. Don't lose that now. Don't let this project, or Elon, or anyone else dictate your path. You have the power to choose, even now." Mia's eyes welled up with tears she hadn't expected. She had been so focused on the bigger picture, on the future of the project, that she had forgotten about herself. She had forgotten that her worth wasn't tied to the success of the mission. Clara sat down beside her, offering a quiet moment of solidarity. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Mia felt like she wasn't alone. The next morning, Mia faced a decision, a choice that would change everything. Would she stand by Elon, continue to push the boundaries of technology and ambition, or would she step back, recalibrate, and find her own balance? Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to send an email that could alter the course of their work forever. But something stopped her, a voice, deep inside, telling her to wait. The air in the lab felt heavier the next morning. The usual hum of activity was subdued, the undercurrent of pressure palpable as everyone quietly carried out their tasks. Mia knew that the team was watching her, waiting for a decision, for a direction. Elon had been strangely distant since their conversation, retreating into his own thoughts as though everything had already been decided. But for Mia, the future was no longer clear-cut. She couldn't keep ignoring the doubts that had been swirling in her mind since that first test. Something about the speed with which they were moving unsettled her, and the more she thought about it, the more she realized that they were all caught in a race with no finish line. If they kept pushing forward without addressing the risks, without considering the consequences, they might not just lose control of the project. They could lose something far more important, their humanity. She walked through the lab, observing the various teams working with their usual intensity, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the excitement in the air wasn't entirely justified. Yes, they had made incredible progress, but Mia had seen this kind of rush before. An obsession with the end goal that overshadowed everything else. She had witnessed the same kind of drive in other teams, in other projects, where the promise of success blinded everyone to the cost of getting there. Her phone buzzed on the table, jolting her from her thoughts. She glanced at the screen, a message from Clara. "Mia, have you made up your mind? The team is waiting for you. Elon is different. I'm worried about him." Mia swallowed hard. The tension in Clara's words wasn't lost on her. She had sensed it too, the change in Elon. It wasn't just the pressure of the project weighing on him. It was something deeper, something darker. Mia knew that whatever decision she made, it wouldn't just affect her and the team. It would affect everyone who came into contact with this technology. Later that afternoon, she found herself in the lab again, standing in front of the reactor. The pulsing light of the core seemed almost hypnotic, like a beacon calling her forward, urging her to push the boundaries even further. But Mia's gaze was drawn to the small desk in the corner of the room, where the journal she'd kept for the past few months sat, filled with notes and observations. She walked over and opened it, her fingers tracing the familiar pages. But this time, she didn't feel the same sense of purpose that she had when she first started. There were entries filled with excitement, with visions of what the project could do for the world. But as she flipped through the pages, she began to see a pattern. Each new idea, each new breakthrough, had come with a price, an unacknowledged cost. The closer they got to perfection, the further they seemed to drift from their original mission. Mia slammed the journal shut, frustration rising in her chest. She wasn't sure what was worse, the pressure to succeed or the fear that the success they were chasing might not even be worth it. She needed to talk to Elon. It didn't take long to find him. Elon was in his office, hunched over a desk, his face illuminated by the glow of multiple screens. When Mia entered, he didn't look up. "Elon," she said softly. He finally glanced up, his eyes dark, tired. "Mia, what's on your mind?" Mia took a deep breath, trying to steady the rising tide of emotions. "We need to talk. About the project. About where we're headed." Elon's face remained impassive. "We're headed exactly where we need to be. The reactor is working. The propulsion systems are advancing. We're making history." "I know," Mia said, her voice steady. "But at what cost? Have you thought about it, Elon? We're moving faster than we can manage. And I'm scared. I'm scared of what we're becoming in the process." Elon's gaze softened, but there was a flicker of something Mia couldn't quite place. He exhaled deeply and leaned back in his chair. "I know the pressure's been intense. I know it's been hard, but I believe in what we're doing, Mia. We're on the verge of something incredible. The world will thank us for it." Mia shook her head. "But at what cost? The world may never know the true cost of what we're doing. And you know what happens when people forget about the consequences. We've seen it happen before." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence in the room was thick, heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. Finally, Elon stood, walking toward the large window overlooking the city below. "You're right. I've been so focused on the bigger picture that I've lost sight of the small things. I know that now. But Mia, we can't stop. Not now. Not when we're so close." Mia's heart pounded in her chest. And what if the closer we get, the further we drift from what we should be? What if, in the end, it isn't the world we're saving? Elon turned to face her, his eyes no longer just tired but conflicted. "What do you want from me, Mia? What do you want us to do?" Mia took a step forward, her voice soft but firm. "I want us to think carefully about what we're doing. To take a step back, just for a moment, and consider the people we are becoming. We can't just race toward the finish line without looking at the path we're leaving behind." Elon didn't answer immediately. He stared at her for a moment, and in that silence, Mia saw something she hadn't seen before. A crack in his certainty, a vulnerability that he had buried beneath his ambition. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. "Maybe you're right. Maybe we've been too focused on the future, too eager to make history. But I can't promise that we'll stop. Not completely." Mia's heart sank, but she didn't let it show. "I know, but we need to find a balance. We can't keep going like this. Not without considering the consequences." Elon looked away, his expression unreadable. "I'll think about it," he said, almost absently. Mia nodded, feeling the weight of the conversation settle between them. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't sure if they were still on the same path. But she also knew that they had no choice but to keep moving forward, together, or not at all. The decision loomed over Mia like a dark cloud, but she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't carry it alone. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in weeks, she felt like she had made the right choice by voicing her concerns. Now, all that was left to do was wait and see if Elon would come to understand the gravity of the situation. And if not, Mia didn't know yet, but she was ready to face whatever came next. The next few days passed in a blur of uncertainty. Mia could feel the weight of her decision hanging in the air, like a storm cloud that had yet to release its rain. Elon seemed to withdraw further into his work, spending long hours in his office, his attention split between the project and his own thoughts. The team, however, had picked up on the tension. There was no longer a sense of excitement in the air, just an undercurrent of unease. Mia couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to give. She had already spoken her truth to Elon, but now the challenge was much larger. How could she reconcile the mission with her own growing fears? The lab was her life. The work was her passion. But was it worth it if the cost was too great? It was the morning of the biggest test yet, a moment that would determine whether their project would become a milestone in human history or a catastrophic failure. The reactor, which had been working in small, controlled bursts, was ready to be activated in full power. The propulsion systems, which could revolutionize travel, were ready to be tested in real conditions. This was it, the culmination of years of work, countless sacrifices, and now, the possibility of either glory or disaster. Mia stood in front of the reactor, her mind racing. The hum of the machinery filled the room, a constant reminder of what they were about to do. She knew that if they went through with it, there would be no turning back. The success of the project could bring them fame, wealth, and the kind of legacy few could even dream of. But the risks, those were unknown, and to Mia, that made all the difference. Clara walked up beside her, breaking the silence. "You okay?" Mia didn't immediately respond, her eyes still fixed on the reactor. Finally, she turned to Clara, her face drawn with worry. "I'm not sure I am. We're on the edge of something big, but I can't shake this feeling that we're playing with fire. Elon, he's obsessed with it. He won't listen to me. What if we're making a huge mistake?" Clara nodded, her eyes full of concern. "I've been thinking the same thing. I know you and Elon have this connection, but this isn't just about him, Mia. This is about all of us. We've already seen signs that things aren't right. We need to be careful." Mia sighed, looking away. "I've tried to talk to him. I've tried to make him see reason, but he's so blinded by the vision of what we can achieve. He won't see it any other way." Clara placed a hand on her shoulder, her voice gentle but firm. "You're not alone in this. We're with you. If you need to step back, if you need to make sure we're doing the right thing, we'll back you up." The warmth of Clara's words was a small comfort, but Mia knew the truth. This was her decision to make. And deep down, she knew she couldn't stand by and let something go wrong without trying to stop it. It was time to face Elon. Mia made her way to his office, her footsteps echoing in the otherwise quiet hallway. When she entered, Elon looked up from his desk, his eyes hollow from lack of sleep. He had been at this for too long, his obsession with success evident in the way his face sagged with exhaustion. "Mia," he said, his tone a mixture of weariness and frustration. "I was expecting you." "I think we need to talk," she said quietly. Elon leaned back in his chair, looking at her with a mixture of curiosity and impatience. "About what? The test? It's already set. We're moving forward." "No," Mia said, shaking her head. "About us. About what's happening. This project, what we're doing, it's not just science. It's not just technology. We're messing with something we don't fully understand, and I'm scared, Elon." For a moment, there was silence. Elon didn't respond immediately, his eyes boring into hers. Finally, he stood, walking toward the window with slow, measured steps. "You've been distant," Mia said softly. "We used to be able to talk about these things, but now it feels like you've already made up your mind." Elon's back was to her, but she could see his shoulders tense. "I haven't made up my mind," he said, his voice low. "I'm just doing what needs to be done. We're so close, Mia. This isn't about me. It's about what we can achieve, what the world needs." Mia took a step forward, her heart pounding. "I get that, but there's more at stake than just success. There's the safety of everyone who might be affected by this. There's the ethical implications of what we're doing. I don't want us to go down this path just because we can. I want us to go down it because we've thought through every consequence." Elon turned to face her, his expression now more resigned than angry. "And what if we wait, Mia? What if we wait and someone else beats us to it? What if we let fear control our every move, and the world never gets to experience what we're capable of?" Mia felt a sharp pang in her chest. She had heard the same argument so many times before, but it didn't make it any easier to accept. "And what if we get it wrong?" she asked quietly. "What if in our haste to be the first, we destroy everything we've worked for?" Elon looked at her for a long time, his face unreadable. The air between them felt thick, suffocating. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't know, but I can't stop now. I can't back out. This is bigger than both of us. Mia's heart dropped, the realization sinking in. He had already made his choice. She nodded slowly, turning toward the door. I hope you're right, Elon. I really do. As Mia walked out of Elon's office, she felt a heaviness in her chest. It was clear that the battle between loyalty and truth had already been won by one side. Elon was committed to his vision, no matter the cost. And Mia, she wasn't sure if she could keep following him down this path. The test was still scheduled, and as she stood in front of the reactor once again, Mia knew that nothing would ever be the same. The day of the test had arrived. The lab was buzzing with activity, the air thick with anticipation. There was a palpable sense of both excitement and anxiety. Every team member knew what was at stake. Today could either be a breakthrough that would change the world or a disaster that would bring everything crashing down. Mia stood by the reactor, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the settings on her tablet. The hum of machinery filled the space, a constant reminder of the powerful forces they were about to unleash. In the back of her mind, she could hear Elon's voice, his conviction that they were on the right path. But the doubts were louder now. She couldn't silence the fear gnawing at her, the voice that warned her they were on the verge of something irreversible. She glanced around the room, taking in the focused faces of the engineers, the scientists, and the technicians. They were all waiting for her decision. They all knew what she had said to Elon, what she had tried to make him see. But now, the moment of truth was here. She couldn't walk away. Not now. Not when the world was watching. Elon, Mia said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. He was standing across the room, speaking to Clara, but he turned at the sound of her voice. There was something in his eyes that made her stomach tighten. His resolve had hardened. Whatever she said, he wasn't going to back down. This is it, Mia said, her gaze never leaving him. We go forward, or we don't. You can't make a choice like this without thinking about what comes next. Elon nodded, his expression unreadable. I've thought about it, Mia, and I'm not going to stop now. We're too close. This could change everything. Mia looked at him for a long moment, her heart heavy. She had known he would say that. He was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. She had already tried to talk him out of it, tried to convince him to consider the consequences. But he had made up his mind. And now it was time for her to make hers. The countdown began, the clock ticking down to the moment of activation. Mia's fingers hovered over the controls, her heart pounding in her chest. The room fell into a tense silence as everyone waited for her to confirm the command. Every eye was on her, and for a moment, she felt the weight of all their expectations. 5, 4, 3. The voice on the intercom counted down. Mia's breath caught in her throat. She could feel the pulse of the reactor building, could see the power surging through the systems. They were about to unleash something unlike anything the world had ever seen. 2, 1. She hit the button. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the reactor roared to life, the machinery humming with a deep, resonant sound. The power surging through the system was more than anyone had anticipated, more than they had hoped for. The propulsion systems, designed to propel spacecraft to unimaginable speeds, now hummed with a promise of unlimited potential. The team erupted in cheers, clapping each other on the back, celebrating the victory that was years in the making. But Mia didn't join in. Her eyes were fixed on the reactor, her mind racing. She could feel it, the energy pulsing in the room, vibrating through the air. It was too much, too fast, and it was just the beginning. As the initial euphoria settled into a more cautious optimism, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The reactor was working perfectly, but there was an undercurrent of instability that no one else seemed to notice. The readouts were showing surges in power that weren't expected, fluctuations that should have been accounted for in the design. She looked up at Elon, who was standing at the center of the lab, basking in the glory of their achievement. He was smiling, his face lit with the kind of satisfaction that only comes from realizing a dream. But Mia could see the same glint in his eyes that she had seen weeks ago, the same spark of obsession that made him blind to the dangers they were facing. Elon, she called, her voice sharp. He turned, surprised to see the look on her face. What's wrong? Look at the readings, she said, pointing to the monitor. There's something off. We're pushing too hard. We need to stop. We need to recalibrate before it's too late. Elon's eyes flicked to the screen, and for a moment, his smile faltered. But then, he shook his head. No, Mia. This is exactly what we've been waiting for. The system is stable. We're on the right track. This is our breakthrough. Mia felt a cold chill run down her spine. She knew he wasn't listening, knew that he was too far gone in his vision to see the danger they were facing. The reactor was pushing out too much power, more than it was designed to handle. If they didn't intervene soon, the entire system could fail. Elon, she said again, her voice more urgent now. This is a mistake. We can't just ignore the signs. But he was already walking away, caught up in the celebration, lost in the moment. Mia's heart raced as she turned back to the controls, her fingers flying over the keys. She had to do something. She couldn't just stand by and let this happen. Suddenly, the room trembled. The ground beneath them shook, the lights flickering as the reactor surged with power. Mia's heart skipped a beat as the monitors flashed red, warning alarms blaring. "Shut it down. Now!" she screamed, rushing to the emergency stop controls. But before she could hit the button, there was a blinding flash of light, followed by a deafening roar. The reactor's core exploded in a burst of energy, sending shockwaves through the room. The walls cracked, and the entire lab was plunged into chaos. Mia was thrown to the ground, her body slamming against the cold concrete floor. The air was thick with smoke, and the room was filled with the sound of screams and alarms. She pushed herself up, her vision swimming as she tried to make sense of what had just happened. "Elon!" she shouted, her voice hoarse with panic. She stumbled toward him, her heart pounding in her chest. He was lying on the floor, unconscious, blood staining his face from a cut above his eye. The reactor was still pulsing with energy, but the system had completely malfunctioned. The damage was catastrophic. Mia's breath caught in her throat. This was it. This was the moment she had feared. Mia's heart raced as she staggered toward Elon, trying to push through the smoke and chaos that filled the lab. The walls were buckling, groaning under the strain of the reactor's explosion. Sparks flew from broken wires, and the air was thick with the acrid scent of burning metal. Her eyes burned as she fought to focus on the task at hand, getting Elon out of here. "Elon!" she cried again, her voice rising above the din of alarms and panicked voices. She reached him just as Clara appeared beside her, both of them kneeling next to him. "He's alive," Clara said, her voice tight with relief. "But we need to get him out of here. Now." Mia nodded, her hands shaking as she tried to lift Elon. The weight of what had just happened crushed her chest. The reactor, the failure, the risk, it was all on her. She had tried to stop it, tried to make Elon see reason, but in the end, he had been too determined, too blinded by his vision of greatness. And now, the cost of that ambition was clear. "Elon, can you hear me?" Mia whispered, brushing his hair back from his forehead. His eyes flickered, but he didn't respond. She could feel his pulse, weak but steady, as Clara helped steady him. "What happened?" Clara asked, looking around the lab in horror. "I don't know," Mia said, her voice breaking. Everything went wrong. We pushed too hard, too fast. We didn't account for the instability in the reactor's power." Elon wouldn't listen, would he? Clara's voice was quiet but cutting. Mia swallowed hard, nodding. No, he was too focused on the dream. He couldn't see the danger. Her words stung, but there was no denying the truth. She had tried to warn him, tried to stop the madness before it became this. The lab was in ruins. The explosion had destroyed much of the equipment, and the once vibrant space now felt like a tomb. The once glorious vision of exploration, of pushing humanity forward, had turned into a nightmare. The dream that Elon had held onto so fiercely had cost them everything. The ambulance ride felt like a lifetime. Mia sat beside Elon, watching his unconscious form with a heavy heart. Clara had managed to stabilize him, but the doctor's face had been grim as they loaded him into the vehicle. The blast had caused severe burns on his arm and leg, and the trauma to his head would need immediate attention. Mia couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning, that the consequences of their actions were far from over. When they arrived at the hospital, the situation became even more urgent. Doctors and nurses rushed Elon into an operating room, leaving Mia and Clara standing in the sterile hallway, unable to do anything but wait. The minutes stretched into hours as they sat in silence, the weight of what had happened pressing down on them like an insurmountable wall. "I don't even know what to say," Clara murmured, breaking the silence. Her voice was raw, filled with disbelief. This wasn't supposed to happen. We were on the verge of something incredible. Mia stared at her hands, unable to look Clara in the eye. "I thought we were too. But I kept having this feeling that something was wrong, that we were pushing too hard. I should have listened to my gut." "You couldn't have known it would end like this," Clara said softly. "You did everything you could. But sometimes people are just too stubborn. They can't see what's right in front of them." Mia nodded, her throat tight. "I tried to make him see. I really did. But now it's too late." Hours later, the doctor emerged from the operating room, his face somber. Mia and Clara stood up immediately, fear gripping their hearts. "How is he?" Mia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The doctor shook his head, clearly reluctant to give them the full picture. "It's difficult. The blast caused significant damage, and the head trauma is more severe than we initially thought. We've stabilized him for now, but we don't know if he'll wake up." Mia's heart dropped into her stomach. The thought of losing Elon, the man who had been a mentor, a partner, and a friend, was almost too much to bear. But there was more at stake than just his life. The project, their work, the future they had all believed in. It was all now in jeopardy. "You'll keep us updated?" Clara asked, her voice filled with quiet determination. "Yes, we'll do everything we can," the doctor said, before turning and walking back into the depths of the hospital. Mia collapsed into a chair, her head spinning. She had failed. She had warned him. She had tried to stop the project from going too far, but in the end, her voice had been drowned out by his ambition. And now, the world would never know the truth. The reactor, the promise of limitless energy and exploration, it had all been destroyed in the pursuit of greatness. Days passed, and Elon remained unconscious. Mia spent her time at the hospital, waiting for any sign of improvement. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, but Mia couldn't shake the guilt that gnawed at her. She should have done more. She should have fought harder. Maybe if she had made a bigger stand, she could have stopped this from happening. But it was too late now. The media had already gotten wind of the explosion. News outlets were reporting on the failed experiment, the catastrophic failure that had set back Elon Musk's plans for space exploration. The world was buzzing with speculation, and Mia knew it was only a matter of time before the blame started to shift. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, breaking her from her thoughts. It was a text from Clara. "Meet me outside. We need to talk." When Mia arrived at the designated spot outside the hospital, Clara was waiting for her, her expression grim. "What's going on?" Mia asked. Clara looked around, ensuring they weren't being overheard. "I've been thinking about everything. We've lost the lab, we've lost Elon's vision, and we've lost all the momentum we had. But we can't let this be the end. There has to be a way to salvage what we can." Mia frowned, unsure of what Clara was getting at. "What do you mean?" "The reactor is gone. The project is over." Clara took a deep breath, her eyes hardening with resolve. "It's not over, Mia. Not if we don't let it be. We have the knowledge, the technology, and the people. We can rebuild. We can make this right." Mia's stomach twisted. "But Elon—" "We'll wake up," Clara interrupted. "And when he does, we'll need to be ready. This isn't just his dream. It's ours too." Mia stood on the rooftop of the hospital, looking out over the city skyline. The weight of the past week pressed down on her, suffocating her thoughts. The explosion, the fire, the aftermath. Everything had been a blur of chaos. Yet, through it all, one thing remained clear in her mind. They couldn't give up. Mia collapsed into a chair, her head spinning. She had failed. She had warned him. She had tried to stop the project from going too far, but in the end, her voice had been drowned out by his ambition. And now, the world would never know the truth. The reactor, the promise of limitless energy and exploration. It had all been destroyed in the pursuit of greatness. Days passed, and Elon remained unconscious. Mia spent her time at the hospital, waiting for any sign of improvement. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, but Mia couldn't shake the guilt that gnawed at her. She should have done more. She should have fought harder. Maybe if she had made a bigger stand, she could have stopped this from happening. But it was too late now. The media had already gotten wind of the explosion. News outlets were reporting on the failed experiment, the catastrophic failure that had set back Elon Musk's plans for space exploration. The world was buzzing with speculation, and Mia knew it was only a matter of time before the blame started to shift. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, breaking her from her thoughts. It was a text from Clara. "Meet me outside. We need to talk." When Mia arrived at the designated spot outside the hospital, Clara was waiting for her, her expression grim. "What's going on?" Mia asked. Clara looked around, ensuring they weren't being overheard. "I've been thinking about everything. We've lost the lab, we've lost Elon's vision, and we've lost all the momentum we had. But we can't let this be the end. There has to be a way to salvage what we can." Mia frowned, unsure of what Clara was getting at. "What do you mean?" "The reactor is gone. The project is over." Clara took a deep breath, her eyes hardening with resolve. "It's not over, Mia. Not if we don't let it be. We have the knowledge, the technology, and the people. We can rebuild. We can make this right." Mia's stomach twisted. "But Elon—" "We'll wake up," Clara interrupted. "And when he does, we'll need to be ready. This isn't just his dream. It's ours too." Mia stood on the rooftop of the hospital, looking out over the city skyline. The weight of the past week pressed down on her, suffocating her thoughts. The explosion, the fire, the aftermath. Everything had been a blur of chaos. Yet, through it all, one thing remained clear in her mind. They couldn't give up. Clara's words kept echoing in her head. "This isn't just Elon's dream. It's ours too." Mia had spent years building the foundation of this project, working side by side with Elon and Clara to push the boundaries of what was possible. Now, with the reactor destroyed and Elon still fighting for his life, the future seemed uncertain. But Clara had a point. The knowledge they had accumulated, the breakthroughs they had made, it couldn't be lost. Not like this. Her phone buzzed again, snapping her out of her reverie. It was a message from Clara. "We need to meet. I have a plan." Mia's stomach tightened. Clara always had a plan. But this felt different. There was a sense of urgency in her words that made Mia nervous. She quickly typed a response. "I'll be there in 10 minutes." The small, dimly lit cafe where they met had an air of familiarity to it. The hum of conversation and the clinking of coffee cups provided a stark contrast to the heavy atmosphere between them. Clara sat at a corner booth, her face shadowed by the low light. When Mia slid into the seat across from her, Clara didn't waste any time. "I've been thinking a lot about our options," Clara said, her voice low. "And I've come to a conclusion." Mia raised an eyebrow. "Go on." Clara took a deep breath, her eyes locked onto Mia's. "We can't just walk away from this. We can't let the world think that the dream is over just because the reactor failed. We can rebuild. We can take what we learned and start again." Mia shook her head. "But the reactor, it's gone. Elon's vision, it's in ruins." Clara held up a hand, silencing her. "I'm not talking about just rebuilding the reactor. I'm talking about something bigger. We've got the tech, Mia, the materials, the design, the knowledge. We don't need to start from scratch. We just need a new direction, a new focus." Mia frowned, unsure of where Clara was going with this. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that we start our own company. We don't need Elon to push this forward. We can do it on our own. We've got everything we need." Mia's heart skipped a beat. The idea of moving forward without Elon, without the visionary who had started it all, felt like betrayal. But Clara was right about one thing. They had the knowledge. They had the skills. And most importantly, they had the drive. "We can't just take over," Mia said slowly. "Elon would never go for it." Clara leaned forward, her eyes burning with intensity. "He doesn't have to know. Not yet. But when he wakes up, When he's ready to lead again, we'll be ready to stand by him. This could be the way to save everything. Mia's mind whirled as she processed Clara's words. Starting over, building something new from the wreckage of their dreams. It seemed impossible, but wasn't that what they had always done? Pushed boundaries, taken risks, made the impossible possible. I don't know, Mia said finally, shaking her head. It feels like we're betraying him. We're not betraying him, Clara insisted. We're ensuring that his vision doesn't die, that it doesn't fade into nothing because of one failure. Mia was quiet for a long time, mulling over Clara's proposition. The plan was bold, risky even, but it might be the only way forward. And in the end, wasn't that what they were always trying to do? Move beyond what was expected and reach for the stars? Okay, Mia said, her voice firm. Let's do it. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Mia and Clara began the process of creating their own startup. They reached out to former colleagues, engineers, and investors they had worked with over the years. They used their knowledge of the failed reactor design to refine their new vision. They didn't need to start from scratch, but they knew they had to make sure the new project was better, safer, more sustainable. But the weight of their decision was not lost on Mia. Every step forward felt like a tightrope walk, the fear of discovery looming over them. They had to move quickly before Elon woke up, before anyone realized what they were doing. There was a fine line between taking the reins and betrayal, and Mia feared they might cross it. Still, as the days turned into weeks, Mia began to feel a sense of hope she hadn't felt in a long time. The project was coming together in ways she hadn't imagined. Clara's vision was slowly taking shape, and they were attracting the right kind of people, passionate, driven individuals who believed in the same mission. The team was growing, and Mia felt a spark of optimism she hadn't allowed herself to feel in the aftermath of the explosion. Then, one day, Mia received the call she had been dreading. Elon had woken up. The hospital room was sterile, cold. Mia stood at the doorway, her heart pounding in her chest. Clara was beside her, both of them nervous about the confrontation that was about to unfold. Elon lay in the bed, pale and weak, his eyes flickering with the remnants of sleep. When he saw them, his face tightened with recognition. "Mia," he said hoarsely. "Clara." "Hi," Mia said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. She couldn't find the words. How do you explain what they had done? Elon tried to sit up, but winced in pain. What happened? The reactor. I remember. Everything's a blur. Clara moved to his side, her hand resting gently on his. You were injured in the explosion. You've been unconscious for weeks. Elon's eyes narrowed. And the project? The reactor? Mia hesitated, her throat dry. It failed. The reactor. Everything we built. It was too unstable. We tried to warn you. But Elon's face darkened. You failed. You failed me. Mia took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. No, Elon. We didn't fail. We pivoted. Clara and I, we started something new. Elon's eyes flickered with a mix of disbelief and anger. What are you talking about? We're still moving forward. We're rebuilding, but we're doing it on our terms, without the same mistakes. The tension in the hospital room was palpable, thick with unspoken words. Elon's gaze flickered between Mia and Clara, his expression shifting from disbelief to anger. His fingers clenched the hospital sheets as if trying to pull himself out of his fragile state, but the pain kept him rooted to the bed. You can't just, Elon started, his voice rough but gaining strength. You can't just take my vision and run with it like this. I built this. I built it for a reason. Mia's heart thudded in her chest. This was the moment of truth, the reckoning they had feared. The decision to move forward without Elon had been theirs to make. But standing here, facing him now, she realized just how monumental it was. This wasn't just about a reactor, a failed project, or a new company. It was about the very essence of their dreams, their loyalty to him and to themselves. We didn't take your vision, Elon, Clara said, her voice steady, though her eyes betrayed the turmoil within. We're trying to make sure it doesn't die. We're not abandoning you. We're adapting. We're building on what we learned. You taught us how to dream bigger. Now, we're trying to make that dream a reality. Without the mistakes, without the same risks. Elon's breath hitched, his eyes narrowing as he tried to process the weight of their words. He had always been the one to drive their ambitions, the one who pushed them to the edge of what was possible. To see them taking the reins without him, it was a blow to his ego, a fracture in the trust he thought he had cultivated with them. You think I'll just accept that? Elon's voice wavered, a mixture of frustration and pain. You think I'll just lie here and watch as you try to finish what I started without me? Mia stepped forward, her voice calm but resolute. We didn't mean for this to happen, Elon. But the reactor was too dangerous. We all knew that. We can't just throw ourselves into the fire again. Not without learning from what happened. This is our way of moving forward, even if we don't do it the way you would have. The silence that followed felt suffocating. Mia could feel her pulse racing, the weight of Elon's stare making her skin prickle. She had always believed in the vision, but now she was questioning whether they had crossed a line. Had they gone too far? Had they betrayed the very foundation of their work together? Elon's expression softened, the harshness in his eyes giving way to something else. Regret, perhaps, or recognition. He exhaled sharply, the weight of his thoughts clear. I didn't want to fail you, he muttered, almost to himself. I thought I had it figured out. But maybe I was too focused on being the one to lead it all. Clara's gaze softened, and she moved to sit beside him. None of us are perfect, Elon. We all have our flaws, but that doesn't mean we give up. We've got a chance here to fix what went wrong, to do better. For a long moment, the three of them sat in silence, each grappling with the enormity of what had transpired. The path ahead was unclear, filled with obstacles and uncertainty, but one thing had become undeniable. They couldn't undo the past, but they could forge a new future. Elon's gaze finally met Mia's. There was a flicker of something in his eyes. Understanding, maybe, or the flickering ember of hope that they could make things right. So, what now? Mia swallowed the lump in her throat, her mind racing. Now we build. Together. But we do it differently. We learn from our mistakes. We take it slow, steady. We don't rush headfirst into the unknown. Elon leaned back against the pillows, his face still pale but his eyes sharp with the familiar spark of ambition. I'll need to trust you on this. But I'm not backing down from my dream. I'm not done yet. Mia felt a wave of relief wash over her. It wasn't a complete reconciliation, but it was a start, a sign that the divide between them could be bridged. She nodded, her resolve hardening. We're not done either, Elon. But this time, we're doing it smarter. The days following Elon's recovery were a blur of activity. The team had been reassembled, the pieces of the puzzle slowly falling into place. Mia and Clara worked tirelessly to refine the new plans, taking the lessons learned from the failed reactor and using them to guide their efforts. They reached out to new partners, formed new alliances, and began drafting a blueprint for the next phase of the project. Elon, now fully recovered, was back at the helm, but there was a noticeable shift in his approach. The fire was still there, burning brightly, but it was tempered by a newfound humility. He listened more, questioned more, and, most importantly, allowed others to take the lead where necessary. For Mia, it was a relief to see him evolve. She had always respected his vision, but she had also seen the dangers of his single-mindedness. The destruction of the reactor had been a wake-up call, not just for them but for him too. This time, they were moving forward with more caution, more planning. They couldn't afford another failure. As the project gained momentum, the team found themselves once again on the brink of something extraordinary. The new reactor design was safer, more sustainable. They had learned from their past mistakes and were applying every ounce of their knowledge and expertise to ensure success. But success didn't come without its price. Every day felt like a battle, one filled with obstacles and setbacks. There were moments of doubt, moments when it seemed like they were pushing against an insurmountable wall. But through it all, they held on to one thing: their belief in the mission. Elon's vision was no longer just his own. It had become theirs too. They had learned to adapt, to pivot when necessary, and to keep pushing forward despite the odds. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Mia felt a glimmer of hope. They were rebuilding, not just the project, but themselves. And maybe, just maybe, They were finally on the path to making Elon Musk's dream a reality. The weeks passed in a blur of meetings, prototypes, and sleepless nights. The team, now fully committed to rebuilding the reactor, had made significant strides. Each piece of the puzzle had been carefully constructed, analyzed, and adjusted. Mia found herself waking up every morning with a sense of purpose that had been absent for far too long. The project was no longer just a dream. It was becoming a tangible reality. But with every step forward came the overwhelming pressure to succeed. They had learned from the past. They had adapted, learned from their failures, and now it was time for the first major test of their new reactor design. They had prepared for this moment for months, and the weight of it pressed heavily on Mia's shoulders. This was the moment when everything could either fall into place or fall apart. The testing facility was buzzing with energy as the team gathered in the control room. The large reactor chamber loomed behind thick glass windows, its advanced systems humming quietly. Everyone was on edge, their nerves palpable. Mia stood at the back of the room, her eyes scanning the monitors that lined the walls. Each readout displayed crucial data: temperature, pressure, energy levels, all pointing to one thing. They were about to push their new design to its limits. "All right," Elon said, his voice steady but laced with tension. He stood at the front, facing the team, his eyes scanning each of them. "This is it. We've worked for months to get to this point. We've made adjustments, we've improved, and we've learned from our mistakes. But now, we're about to find out if it's enough." Mia's stomach tightened. She had seen Elon speak in front of crowds countless times before, always with that same confident demeanor. But today, there was something different in his eyes. This time, it wasn't just about the project. It was about redemption, about proving that they hadn't failed him, that they hadn't failed themselves. The countdown began on the main screen. 10, 9, 8. Mia's heart raced. She clenched her fists, trying to steady her breathing. Every second felt like an eternity. 7, 6, 5. Clara stood beside her, her eyes fixed on the reactor chamber. "You ready?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Mia nodded, though her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. "I don't know," she admitted, "but we have to be." 4, 3, 2. A sudden, sharp beep echoed through the control room. Mia's breath caught in her throat as the reactor's core powered up for the first time. The machines around them hummed louder, and the temperature began to rise steadily on the readouts. The energy levels surged, but everything seemed to be holding steady. For the first time in months, the hope that they had buried deep inside began to resurface. 1. The final moment arrived. The reactor activated, its core lighting up in a brilliant pulse of energy. The monitors all lit up green, signaling that everything was functioning as expected. A collective sigh of relief rippled through the room. Mia felt her knees weaken, but she caught herself, her heart still hammering in her chest. They had done it. The new design was working. But the true test was still to come. For the next few hours, the team monitored the reactor closely. The readings remained stable, and everything seemed to be progressing smoothly. Mia couldn't allow herself to relax. Not yet. There was always the possibility that something could go wrong. The longer they kept the reactor running, the higher the stakes. Elon paced in front of the monitors, his fingers tapping nervously against the control panel. "I want to see real-time data on all energy fluctuations," he ordered. His voice was tight, his eyes never leaving the screen. Clara moved to Mia's side, sensing the unease in her. "How are you holding up?" Mia glanced at her, trying to force a smile. "I'm okay, just waiting for the other shoe to drop." Clara chuckled softly. "We've prepared for this, Mia. We're ready. The system is stable." Mia nodded, but the anxiety didn't dissipate. She had seen so many promising moments end in disaster before. The temptation to look away from the monitors, to close her eyes and just breathe, was strong, but she resisted. There was too much at stake now. Too many people had invested their time, their trust, their hopes into this project. They couldn't afford to fail again. Hours passed, and still, the readings remained stable. Mia had never felt such a mix of emotions. The possibility of success was within their grasp, but the risk of failure was just as real. She looked over at Elon. His posture had relaxed somewhat, but his focus remained unbroken. "This is it," he said suddenly, breaking the silence. "We're going to push it further. Let's see what this thing can really do." Mia's eyes widened. "Are you sure? We're running at full capacity. If something goes wrong—" "I'm sure," Elon interrupted, his voice firm. "It's the only way to know if it's truly ready. If we don't push it now, we'll never know if we've actually solved the core issues." Mia hesitated. He was right, of course. They couldn't test the limits without testing the limits. But the risk, it was still there. They had learned so much from their mistakes, but the pressure to succeed was overwhelming. As Elon moved to initiate the next phase of the test, Mia's mind raced. What if they were pushing too hard? What if this time, they wouldn't be so lucky? She caught Clara's eye and saw the same flicker of doubt. But Clara's expression quickly shifted to one of resolve. "We've got this," Clara mouthed, her eyes full of conviction. Mia nodded, trying to muster the same strength. They were in this together. No matter what happened, they had come this far. They couldn't stop now. Elon's fingers hovered over the controls, his focus unshakable. "Activate." The reactor roared to life as the core powered up again. Faster now, more intense. The energy levels surged, higher than before, and for a brief, exhilarating moment, everything seemed perfect. But then, the alarms went off. The room erupted into chaos. Red lights flashed. The monitors began to beep in frantic warning. The reactor was unstable. The energy levels were spiking, too quickly, too dangerously. "Mia!" Elon shouted over the noise. "Get the backup systems online now." Mia's heart pounded in her chest as she rushed to the backup control panel, her hands flying over the keys. Every second felt like an eternity as she worked to stabilize the system. The reactor's readings were off the charts, the pressure building dangerously. She could hear Clara shouting orders to the rest of the team, but Mia's focus was entirely on the reactor. This can't happen. Not now. Not again. She activated the emergency shutdown sequence, praying it would be enough to prevent disaster. The energy levels slowly began to stabilize, the reactor's core dimming as the pressure released. Slowly, the alarms quieted, and the lights returned to their normal state. But the damage had been done. The room fell silent. No one moved. No one spoke. The failed test hung heavily in the air, a bitter reminder of the risks they faced. Elon exhaled sharply, his face a mask of frustration. "We almost had it." Almost. Mia felt a cold weight settle in her chest. They had come so close, and yet they had failed again. The hope she had held onto now seemed distant, replaced by a sinking feeling that the dream they had worked so hard for might never be realized. The tension in the room was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. The emergency lights still flickered faintly, casting eerie shadows on the faces of the team. Elon stood motionless, his expression unreadable, his eyes locked on the now dormant reactor. Mia couldn't tell if it was the exhaustion that had overtaken her or the crushing sense of failure, but her body felt as though it were weighed down by 1,000 pounds. "Everyone, take a moment," Elon said, his voice low but steady. "We need to debrief and assess what went wrong. This isn't the end. Not by a long shot." Mia glanced at Clara, who had moved closer to her, offering her a tight, reassuring smile. It didn't feel reassuring. It felt hollow. The disappointment hung like a dark cloud over everything. Clara's hand found Mia's arm, giving it a gentle squeeze. "We'll figure this out," Clara said quietly, but Mia could hear the uncertainty in her voice too. The debriefing was an uncomfortable silence punctuated by rapid-fire technical discussions, but the underlying tension was impossible to ignore. Elon didn't sugarcoat anything. They had come so close. They had been within inches of their goal. But the reactor had failed them. "We need to figure out why the pressure surged like that," Mia said, her voice shaky, though she tried to sound firm. "It could be a flaw in the design, something we missed." "We'll go through everything," Elon responded, his tone colder than she expected. "We have to. Every piece of data, every line of code, every component. We can't afford another mistake." But Mia could see it in his eyes. Elon Musk, the man who had seemingly never known failure, was shaken. This wasn't like the Tesla launch or SpaceX's early days. This felt different. It wasn't just about technology. It was about proving to the world, and to himself, that they could succeed where others had failed. Mia took a deep breath, her fingers still trembling. "I'll handle the diagnostics," she said, more to herself than anyone else. "We'll go through every single detail, one step at a time." Elon didn't reply immediately, but after a long pause, he nodded. "All right, let's get back to work." The next few hours were a blur of screens, data, and failed attempts to isolate the problem. Mia's mind raced, flipping through every variable, every possibility. But no matter how many times she checked, nothing stood out. The reactor had been running smoothly at first, so what had gone wrong? Clara hovered by her side, scanning over her shoulder, offering quiet words of encouragement, though even she couldn't offer solutions. Mia felt the weight of the moment settle deeper with each passing second. She had always been confident in her abilities, but now she wasn't sure of anything. Finally, around midnight, after hours of examining diagnostics and recalibrating components, Mia found it. There, buried within the layers of data, was an anomaly, a tiny detail that no one had caught before. The cooling system had malfunctioned just before the reactor reached its peak performance, causing a small but catastrophic surge in pressure. Mia's heart skipped a beat. "This is it. This is the answer." "Clara," she called, her voice filled with a sense of hope. "I found it." The cooling system malfunctioned. It triggered the pressure surge. Clara rushed over, eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and relief. "Are you sure?" "I'm positive. I'll run a full test tomorrow to confirm, but this is the issue." Elon, who had been pacing anxiously in the corner of the room, overheard the conversation and turned quickly. "Are you sure? If this is the issue, we can fix it." Mia nodded, a sense of clarity returning. "We'll need to rebuild the cooling system. It's the only way to ensure the pressure stays stable under full capacity." "We can do that," Elon said, his voice now firm. "We've already rebuilt half the reactor. A cooling system is nothing." For the first time in hours, Mia allowed herself to smile. "Then we're not done yet." The next few days were grueling. The team worked around the clock, replacing faulty parts, reprogramming the cooling systems, and testing the reactor at different levels of capacity. The tension in the air never fully dissipated, but each test brought them closer to success. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they were ready for another full test. The team gathered once more in the control room, their faces drawn with exhaustion but filled with a renewed sense of purpose. Elon glanced at Mia before speaking. "This is it. We're going to push it to the limit. But this time, we know the weak points. This time, we're ready." Mia met his gaze and nodded. She wasn't afraid anymore. They had a plan, and they were going to see it through, no matter the cost. The countdown began again, but this time, there was no panic. The reactor powered up smoothly, and the energy levels climbed steadily. The cooling system held, and the pressure remained stable. Mia watched the monitors carefully, her heart pounding with every second that passed. The core illuminated brightly, humming with life. 10, 9, 8. Mia's eyes never left the screen. Each countdown number felt like a step closer to victory, closer to redemption. 7, 6, 5. Clara stood beside her, her hand resting on Mia's shoulder. "You did it. We did it." Mia could feel the smile tugging at her lips, but she stayed focused. The reactor had to hold. They had to make it through this test. 4, 3, 2. The energy levels reached their peak, and everything remained stable. The reactor continued to hum, glowing bright with controlled power. The data remained steady. There were no alarms, no red lights. The team had done it. 1. The reactor held, and the room erupted in a mixture of disbelief and relief. They had done it. After months of setbacks, failures, and uncertainty, the reactor was finally stable at full capacity. They had cracked the code. Elon looked over at Mia, his expression softening for the first time in what felt like forever. "You did it," he said, a rare sense of admiration in his voice. Mia felt a rush of pride. "We did it." The next few weeks saw a flurry of activity as the reactor system was fine-tuned and optimized for commercial use. Elon's team worked tirelessly to ensure that everything was ready for the world to see. And soon enough, the project that had once seemed impossible became the centerpiece of Musk Industries. For Mia, it wasn't just the reactor's success that mattered. It was the journey, the sleepless nights, the doubts, the fears. All of it had brought them to this moment. She had learned something invaluable about herself, and she had learned something about Elon as well. He was driven, yes, but he was also human, just like the rest of them. In the end, it wasn't just about innovation. It was about perseverance. The weeks following the success of the reactor felt like a dream. Mia had walked through those dark days of uncertainty and doubt, only to find herself standing at the forefront of a technological revolution. She was exhausted, her body weary from the endless nights of testing and troubleshooting, but her mind was alive with possibilities. This wasn't just a victory, it was the start of something bigger. And yet, as the celebrations died down and the press conferences came to an end, Mia couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was missing. She'd achieved what she set out to do, but there was a deeper question that lingered in the back of her mind. What next? Elon had been unusually quiet since the reactor's success. While the world celebrated, he had retreated into his own thoughts, spending hours locked away in his office, working on the next big project. Mia couldn't help but admire his drive, but it also left her wondering if he ever took a moment to reflect, to simply be. It was Clara who finally snapped Mia out of her thoughts. "You're thinking too much," Clara said one afternoon, walking into the lab where Mia had been sifting through more data. "You need a break." Mia glanced up, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I don't know how to take a break anymore." Clara shook her head, sitting down beside her. "You've earned it. We all have. Look, I get it. You've got your eyes on the future, but you've got to take a breath. We've done something incredible." "You've done something incredible?" Mia hesitated, glancing at the stack of papers and monitors in front of her. The weight of the achievement was there, but it didn't feel like the finish line she had imagined. She had expected fireworks, a grand celebration, but instead, there was a quiet emptiness. "I guess I thought that when we succeeded, everything would feel different," Mia admitted. "But it doesn't." Clara smiled knowingly. "Success doesn't change everything, Mia. It's about what you do with it, what you decide to do next." Later that week, Elon called a meeting. The team gathered in the main conference room, the buzz of anticipation palpable. Everyone knew Elon had something big planned, something that could redefine the world once again. But there was an unspoken tension in the room as well. What if the pressure was too much? What if they weren't ready for the next step? Elon stood at the front of the room, a confident smile on his face. "I think it's time for us to think bigger. We've proven the world wrong once already. But the next challenge will make that one look small." Mia straightened, curiosity piqued. "What do you have in mind?" Elon's eyes gleamed. "We're not just going to stop with reactors. I've been thinking about our future on Mars, about colonizing, about creating sustainable living outside of Earth. But there's one more thing we need first, before we can even dream about Mars." He paused for effect, letting the weight of his words settle. "We need to perfect a new form of energy, one that can power not only Mars, but Earth. A limitless, clean energy source that will change everything." Mia felt her breath catch in her throat. The audacity of it. The vision. Elon Musk, the man who had already taken on the impossible, was setting his sights on something even grander. "Are you serious?" she asked, barely able to believe it. "We've only just cracked the reactor. This would take years." Elon nodded. "Exactly. But we've already defied the odds once. I don't know about you, but I'm not about to stop now." Mia stood outside the conference room after the meeting ended, her thoughts swirling. The idea was monumental, but it was also terrifying. Could they really achieve something so ambitious? Could they really change the world again? "Don't overthink it," Clara said, appearing at her side. "Elon has a way of making impossible things seem inevitable, but you know that." Mia sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I just don't know. It feels like we're setting ourselves up for something bigger than we can handle." Clara smiled, her eyes filled with understanding. "That's the point. It's supposed to feel impossible. That's how you know you're on the right path. If it didn't feel impossible, it wouldn't be worth doing. Mia looked at her friend, a sense of reassurance settling over her. Clara was right. Everything about this journey had felt impossible, from the first missteps with the reactor to the eventual breakthrough. It was the impossible challenges that had driven them all forward. "All right," Mia said, her voice filled with a newfound determination. "Let's do it." The next few months saw a flurry of activity. The team expanded, bringing in experts from various fields: chemists, physicists, engineers, and even biologists. Together, they worked tirelessly on refining the reactor technology, exploring new ways to harness energy, and studying how to create a self-sustaining ecosystem for Mars. But Mia couldn't help but notice a shift in the way Elon operated. He was no longer just the visionary, the man with the ideas. He had become something more, something bigger. He was a leader in every sense of the word, pushing the team to their limits, demanding their best work, but also guiding them through the tough times. And while his intensity had always been a part of him, Mia saw something different now. He wasn't just driven by a desire to succeed. He was driven by a belief that they were on the cusp of something that could reshape humanity's future. It was in those moments, those quiet conversations in the lab or late-night discussions over coffee, that Mia realized something profound. Elon's vision wasn't just about changing the world. It was about inspiring others to see beyond what was possible, to push the limits of imagination. And for the first time in a long while, Mia felt like she was part of something that mattered. The days bled into one another, each one more intense than the last. The team was working around the clock, their collective minds fixated on the grand goal that Elon Musk had set before them. They weren't just building a new energy source. They were paving the way for humanity's future. Mars wasn't a dream anymore. It was a goal. But as the weeks stretched on, Mia felt herself at a crossroads. She had grown so used to the rush of new problems, of constant innovation, that she hadn't taken the time to reflect. What did all this mean for her? She had accomplished more than she had ever imagined. But now, she was beginning to wonder if the endless pursuit of progress was clouding her own sense of purpose. She couldn't shake the thoughts that circled in her mind. What did she want from all of this? Was she simply a cog in the machine? Or was there more to her journey than just working for the next groundbreaking project? One evening, after another long day of testing and tweaking the new reactor models, Mia found herself standing alone in the quiet of the lab. The hum of the machines was the only sound, and for the first time in months, the silence felt deafening. She glanced at the reactor, its powerful glow lighting up the room. She could still remember the moment when it had all clicked, the moment she had realized the answer to the reactor's malfunction. That feeling of accomplishment had been overwhelming. Yet now, standing in the same room, it felt like the spark had faded. Elon had always been focused on the bigger picture, and the team followed his lead. But where did that leave her? Where did it leave any of them? Was their legacy just about reaching the next milestone? Or was it about something more personal? The next day, Mia found herself outside the lab, walking through the grounds, her mind wrestling with these heavy questions. Clara found her there, her eyes immediately assessing Mia's mood. "Thinking about what comes next?" Clara asked, stepping beside her. Mia gave a small nod, the weight of the question heavy on her shoulders. "Yeah, it's like, I've been so focused on getting to this point, on proving myself, that I forgot to stop and think about why I'm doing it." Clara paused, then smiled knowingly. "It's easy to get caught up in the race, isn't it? But you've already made history, Mia. You've done something that will change the world. You've earned the right to take a breath." Mia exhaled slowly, allowing herself a moment of quiet contemplation. "I know. I just don't know where I fit into all of this anymore. It feels like I've done what I came here to do, but now, what's left?" Clara placed a hand on her shoulder, her voice warm. "You don't have to have it all figured out, Mia, but you've made an impact, and I think you'll keep making one. You're more than just the woman who saved the reactor or helped build the next big thing. You're someone who can shape the future in ways you haven't even realized yet." Mia smiled, feeling the comfort of Clara's words settle into her chest. "I hope so." A few days later, Elon called Mia into his office. She'd grown accustomed to the late-night summons, But this time, there was a different energy in the room when she walked in. Elon was sitting at his desk, his usual intensity tempered by something softer, more reflective. "Mia, come in," he said, gesturing for her to sit. "I've been thinking a lot about the future, about what we're building, about where we're headed." Mia sat down, watching him closely. It was rare for Elon to show this kind of vulnerability. He was always the one driving forward, but today, he seemed more contemplative. "We've created something incredible," he continued, "but I'm realizing that the next steps are just as important as the ones we've taken. I don't want to just build a reactor or power Mars. I want to build a legacy that lasts." Mia nodded. "I've been thinking a lot about that too." Elon's eyes softened, and he leaned forward. "You've done something no one thought possible, and I think you have the potential to do so much more. I'm not just talking about energy, or Mars, or even this reactor. I'm talking about shaping the future of humanity. You have the ability to inspire others, to lead in a way that transcends all of this." Mia was stunned. She hadn't expected this kind of conversation from Elon. "I appreciate that," she said, her voice quiet, "but I don't know if I'm ready for that. I'm not sure I even know what my legacy is supposed to be." "You don't have to know," Elon replied, his voice steady. "But I do know this. You're capable of so much more than you think. And the world needs people like you. People who challenge the status quo, who think beyond the limits, who aren't afraid to ask the hard questions." Mia sat back in her chair, the weight of his words sinking in. She had always thought her legacy would be defined by the tangible things, the projects, the technology, the breakthroughs. But now, in this quiet room with Elon, she began to realize that her legacy could be so much more. It wasn't just about what she built, but about how she inspired others to build alongside her. As the months passed, Mia found herself taking on a new role. She wasn't just the engineer or the problem solver. She became a mentor to the younger members of the team, a guide for those who shared her passion for innovation. She spent more time speaking with those who had once been intimidated by her expertise, listening to their ideas and helping them bring their visions to life. She learned to embrace the idea that her legacy wasn't something she had to define all at once. It was something that would grow with her, just as her own understanding of herself continued to evolve. In the end, Mia realized that the future was never just about the next project, the next big leap in technology, or the next groundbreaking innovation. It was about the people who would carry the torch forward, those who would look to her and others like her for inspiration. And as she stood at the forefront of this new age, ready to tackle whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew one thing for certain. Her legacy was still unfolding, and she was ready for whatever came next.